Chapter 1024, Your Principal Zhang. Not only was Song Zhen frenzied by the sight before him, the mouths of guild leader Zhong and the others were also twitching uncontrollably, and they felt as if their minds were about to blow at that sight. It was indeed true that the chairs of their blacksmith guild were extremely expensive commodities, made out of superior materials, but even so, it was still just wood. Perhaps it might have been a decent weapon in a street fight against ordinary humans, but to use it to deal with their 3 stars violet moon formation was a blatant insult to them. Gritting his teeth tightly, guild leader Zhong harumphed coldly. Since you are courting death, don't blame us when you get hurt. Flicking his wrist forcefully, a sword chi reminiscent of a relentless waterfall flowed forth. Voila! In the blink of an eye, guild leader Zhong had already executed his strongest sword art. Half-saint battle technique. Knots of 1,000 threads. As if 2 interweaved webs, 1,000 knots there are in my heart. This battle technique was created by a lovesick sword master 1,000 years ago. The main aim of the sword chi lay not in killing but coiling. Once struck by this technique, one would feel as if one had fallen into a marsh, unable to struggle free. With guild leader Zhong's current strength, complemented by the effects of the formation, not even a Saint 2 Dan intermediate stage cultivator would be able to deal with it easily. It seemed like he was aware that ordinary means wouldn't be effective on the other party, considering the other party's extraordinary strength and deep comprehension of formations. As such, he had decided to use his strongest means in the hope of taking down the other party swiftly. Hula. The sword chi swiftly formed circle after circle. Once trapped within, even the most formidable of experts would have to suffer a fair bit to break free. Yet, the young man before him didn't seem to be aware of the danger ahead of him. Holding the leg of the chair, he continued proceeding forward fearlessly. You came. Guild leader Zhong sneered. Tzzzz. With a skillful flick of his sword, the sword chi instantaneously surrounded Zhang Xian. I succeeded. Guild leader Zhong nearly leaped up in excitement. He had only intended to use this technique to harass the other party, hoping to uncover the full extent of the other party's strength through it. Yet, who knew that he would successfully coil his sword chi around the other party so easily? So far, he had never encountered a cultivator who could break free from his knots of 1,000 threads before. Delighted, guild leader Zhong had just started thinking about how he should deal with the other party when the person who should have been trapped within his knots of 1,000 threads abruptly vanished, causing his sword chi to end up coiling around nothing. The next moment, the other party abruptly appeared right before him, and the blunt, squarish edges of the wooden chair came crashing down forcefully on his head. Guild leader Zhong's body stiffened. Before he could make sense of what had just happened, a sharp pain abruptly assaulted his face. Peng 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 peng. Despite the weak material used to make the chair, it had been reinforced by the other party's shinchi, making it as tough as steel. In the blink of an eye, his face was already completely soaked in blood. Wait a moment. The other 2 6-star blacksmiths who had been fighting alongside guild leader Zhong were also frenzied by the sight before them. They had gone to the extent of utilizing a collaborative formation along with their strongest attack, and yet, they had still ended up being pummeled by the other party. More importantly, it was one thing if the other party had wielded a powerful weapon, but he was only equipped with the chair he had been sitting down on a moment ago. Just the thought of the current situation left them feeling so stifled that they could spurt blood. It was not much of an issue that he had been pummeled by an expert, but if the other blacksmiths were to learn that their guild leader had been viciously pummeled by a person wielding with a chair, they would become the laughingstock of the entire Fire Source City. As such, the 2 elders hurriedly charged forward to save their guild leader. The jinchi in their bodies surged furiously as they drew out 2 white streams of silk-like sword chi. However, before their attack could land on the young man, the sight before them abruptly darkened. All of a sudden, they found a chair headed right toward their faces as well. Pilipila. Zhang Xian swung his arm relentlessly, bringing the chair down upon the trio before him. They sure were shameless. It was out of concern for their dignity that he had held himself back, but those three were so thick-skinned that they didn't know when they would stop. What formation, strongest attack, and sword art? Shouldn't they have realized that it was futile by now? Even a Saint 2 Dan combat master wasn't a match for him. What could 3 Saint 1 Dan fellows do? Putting aside setting up a formation, even if they were to bring their entire extended family over, they would still not have been a match for him. After 2 minutes of merciless pummeling, the 3 most esteemed blacksmiths in the guild were eventually left lying on the ground, bruised all over. This. Sun Jin was dumbfounded, unable to comprehend what had just happened. He had thought that, with the guild leader and the 2 elders making a move simultaneously, they would surely have been able to subdue the other party easily. Yet, never in his dreams did he expect to see the other party easily suppressing the trio with just a chair in hand. For a chair to actually overwhelm a half-saint weapon, just what was this? All right. After giving the guild leader and the 2 elders a harsh beating, Zhang Xian finally placed the chair down and sat down on it once more. Are you willing to listen to my words now? You. Who in the world are you? Not expecting a 20-year-old young man to actually possess such astounding prowess, guild leader Zhong clenched his jaws tightly and roared, barging into the blacksmith guild and beating up the guild leader and elders. I have already reported this matter to the head of the Master Teacher Pavilion. Be prepared to face the wrath of Pavilion Master Feng. The Master Teacher Pavilion was in charge of maintaining the security and order of the region it was stationed in. Regardless of the identity of the young man before him, his act of barging into the blacksmith guild and intentionally wounding its members had already infringed upon the rules of the Master Teacher Pavilion. The other party would have already gotten away by the time the personnel from the blacksmith guild headquarters arrived to deal with this matter. However, there was still the Firesource City Master Teacher Pavilion located not too far away, and once they learned of the matter, they would surely rush over at top speed. While many had viewed him to be the strongest expert in Firesource City, guild leader Zhong knew that that was far from the case. In terms of fighting prowess, there was no doubt that Pavilion Master Feng was above him. On top of that, for some reason, many experts had gathered in the Regional Master Teacher Pavilion in recent days. Once they dispatched their forces, they would surely be able to apprehend that fellow and teach him a lesson that he would never forget. Pavilion Master Feng. You are talking about Feng Yihui? Zhang Xian asked with an ironic smile on his lips. That's right. Guild leader Zhong roared affirmatively. The head of the Firesource City Master Teacher Pavilion, Feng Yihui, was his close friend, and they had known one another for more than 100 years now. As soon as he learned that someone had barged into the blacksmith guild, he had immediately sent a message to inform the other party. Judging from the amount of time that had passed, the other party was due to arrive very soon. All he could do now was pray for Pavilion Master Feng to arrive as soon as possible so as to back him up. However, at that moment, the young man before him abruptly turned his gaze outside and said, Pavilion Master Feng, you have been watching this commotion long enough. Isn't it about time you come in? Watching this commotion. Pavilion Master Feng has already arrived. Gedeng. An ominous premonition struck guild leader Zhong's heart. He hurriedly turned his head and saw an old man walking over with an awkward look on his face. Zhang Shi. Upon walking into the room, the old man bowed deeply to the young man first before turning his gaze toward him. Guild leader Zhong. This old man was the head of the Firesource City Master Teacher Pavilion, Feng Yihui. Upon receiving his old friend's call for aid, he had immediately rushed over as soon as he could, fearing that the other party might have been in danger. However, when he arrived at the doorstep, he had realized that the so-called intruder was actually Principal Zhang, and he had immediately halted his footsteps. Principal Zhang was a 6-star master teacher like him, but as the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, his standing was a tier above his, comparable to 7-star master teachers. Naturally, he didn't have the right to question the other party's actions. As such, even when he saw guild leader Zhong being viciously pummeled by a chair, he had continued to hide outside, not daring to step in to intervene. However, he hadn't expected that Principal Zhang would actually notice his presence. With his presence exposed, he had no choice but to walk out awkwardly. Zhang Shi. He is a master teacher. Noticing how respectful Pavilion Master Feng was when he greeted the other party, guild leader Zhong's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly turned his gaze toward the young man. Didn't the other party say that he was a 6-star blacksmith? Why did he become a master teacher all of a sudden? On top of that, for Pavilion Master Feng to treat the other party with such respect. Zhang Shi. CC, could you be the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, Zhang Xian? Guild leader Zhong's eyes widened in astonishment as realization struck him. He had no idea whether Principal Zhang was at Fire Source City or not, but he was aware that there were 20,000 students from the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy who were in the midst of a mission there at the moment. Of the 20,000 students, 10,000 of them had blacksmith as their main supporting occupation, and they had just requested a substantial sum of smithing resources from them just 2 days ago, so naturally, he was aware of the matter. Considering that there were 20,000 students there, it wouldn't be a surprise if the principal was here as well. Indeed, I am Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian nodded. Principal Zhang. Song Zhen's body stiffened in disbelief when he heard those words, and soon after, his eyes turned fiery with agitation. It hadn't been long since Principal Zhang had been inaugurated as the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, but his name was already well known throughout the entire Hongyuan Empire. Even the citizens of a place as remote as Fire Source City had all heard of his name. For such a legendary figure to say that it was possible for him to become a blacksmith. Perhaps, there just might be hope for him. Forming a stark contrast to Song Zhen's excitement was Sun Jin's look of horror. His eyes narrowed in disbelief as a feeling of weakness assaulted his entire body. If the other party had only been a blacksmith, he might just have been able to deny it to the very end. But if the other party was a master teacher, it was doubtful that his strategy would be able to work. The discerning eyes of the master teachers were not something that could be fathomed through common sense, and the master teacher pavilion possessed incredible means that would make it nigh impossible for anyone to lie to them. Not to mention, Zhang Xian was the cream of the crop among the master teachers, a true legend. Guild leader Zhong's face had paled with fright, but after all that had happened, he was reluctant to give up. Even if you are the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, surely it is against the rules for you to barge into the blacksmith guild and assault our men. Even if the other party had a standing higher than his, to barge into their base and wound so many of their men, surely the Master Teacher Pavilion wouldn't condone such actions. Rules? Harumphing coldly, Zhang Xian rose from his seat. Commanding the authority and disposition of a principal, he said, only those who abide by the rules deserve to be protected by the rules. Only those who abide by the rules deserve to be protected by the rules. Guild leader Zhong was baffled by Zhang Xian's words. When has our blacksmith guild broken the rules? Song Zhen, come over. Zhang Xian turned to the middle-aged man by the side and beckoned him over. Yes. Nodding, Song Zhen hurried forward. Exert your Jinqi, Zhang Xian instructed. Song Zhen nodded before driving his Jinqi. The next moment, a heavy aura permeated the entire room. This type of Jinqi. Guild leader Zhong's eyes widened in bewilderment before they abruptly narrowed in realization. As a 6-star pinnacle blacksmith, he could tell with a single glance what attribute the other party's Jinqi was and whether it complemented the earth flames or not. It was apparent that, with the middle-aged man's Jinqi, it was impossible for him to become a blacksmith. Seeing that guild leader Zhong understood what he was getting at, Zhang Xian turned to Song Zhen and urged him on. Tell your story to guild leader Zhong over here. Yes. Song Zhen nodded. I was one of blacksmith son Jin's apprentices, and I have been learning smithing ever since I was 7. The cultivation technique that I am practicing has been taught by him. Without hiding anything, he repeated everything that he had told Zhang Xian previously to guild leader Zhong. Even though he still wasn't too sure what was going on, he knew that Principal Zhang was doing all of it for him, and he trusted the other party as well. He imparted such a cultivation technique to you, and yet, he still urged you to take the blacksmith examination? How is this possible? Unless... Right after hearing Song Zhen's words, guild leader Zhong's face turned completely pale. With a face as cold as the biting frost of a winter night, he turned to look at Sun Jin. Chapter 1025, Master Teachers Aren't to be Deceived. As a 6-star pinnacle blacksmith, if guild leader Zhong still couldn't understand what was happening after hearing so much, he might as well just end his life then and there. However, while doubts had sprouted his heart, he still couldn't really believe that Sun Jin would commit such atrocities. Sun Jin was the elder he favored the most, and he had even intended to pass down his position as the guild leader to him. Why would the other party commit such foolishness? However, the truth was already laid clearly before him, and he had no choice but to face it. There was no way the principal of a master-teacher academy would barge into the blacksmith guild and cause such an uproar without investigating the matter properly. What is going on here? Gritting his teeth coldly, guild leader Zhong questioned the fellow in front of him. He really wanted to skin the other party alive at this moment. If this matter was indeed true, not only would Sun Jin be disgraced, the headquarters would also make an example out of the Firesource City Blacksmith Guild to warn other blacksmiths from engaging in such immoral actions. As the guild leader, he would have to bear the criticisms from the public for his neglect of responsibility, perhaps even going down in historical records for his incompetence. Sun Jin's lips twitched uncontrollably as he tried to explain. Guild leader, I didn't do it. I really don't know what is going on. You don't know what is going on. A sharp glint flashed across guild leader Zhong's eyes. You should know full well the consequences of lying to a master teacher. Come clean now, and I might still be able to plead on your behalf. Otherwise, once your sins surface, I won't be able to say a word even if Principal Zhang has you executed at this very moment. Master teachers weren't to be deceived. If one were found lying to a master teacher in the midst of an investigation, their sins would engender far graver consequences. Not only would the person in question be executed on the spot, even their kin and students might be implicated, possibly being barred from joining any upper 9 paths occupations for their entire lives. This wasn't the rule set by the master-teacher pavilion but a joint agreement made by the various occupations. This was something they had decided upon out of respect for the master-teacher pavilion due to their contributions to the world. If one would deceive even the teachers, they had already lost their principles. A person who lived by no principles would only eventually become a disaster for society. Sun Jin's face paled, and his body began trembling non-stop. It went without saying that he was aware of such a rule as well, but there was a spark of hope in the depths of his heart. Perhaps, if he could drag things out and the other party was unable to find any concrete evidence of his wrongdoings, he might just be acquitted of his sins. Is there nothing that you want to say? Guild leader Zhong bellowed as the disappointment in his eyes deepened. From the moment that Sun Jin hesitated, the truth was already apparent to him. If Sun Jin had really done nothing of the sort, he would surely have fought hard for his innocence. There wouldn't have been a look of dilemma on his face. A slight gesture, but it spoke 1,000 words. Having come to the same conclusion as well, Pavilion Master Feng Yihue harumphed coldly by the side. Don't harbor hopes that the Master-Teacher Pavilion will let this matter pass just by dragging things out. Do you honestly think that the Master-Teacher Pavilion would be so incompetent as to be unable to uncover the truth of a matter as simple as this? He felt that this matter was a failure on his part as well. Such an atrocity had been committed in his area of jurisdiction, and yet, he was actually ignorant of it. In the end, it even required Principal Zhang, who had barely arrived a few days ago, to point the matter out and resolve it. Having his thoughts being voiced, Sun Jin's body froze in horror. His lips pursed tightly together in fear. Indeed, as long as the Master-Teacher Pavilion put its mind into it, there was nothing that it couldn't uncover. Many years might have passed after what he had done, but the family members of the 30 apprentices he had taken in back then were still around. He was only able to get away with it thus far due to the lack of attention on the humble apprentices in the blacksmith guild. However, if a thorough investigation were to be conducted, the master-teacher pavilion would surely be able to find evidence of his wrongdoing. An apprentice failing the blacksmith examination for many years might be attributed to his lack of talent, but for it to happen to 30 apprentices, even a fool could tell that something was wrong with it. Moreover, gathering his jinchi in his left hand, he discreetly reached out for the storage ring on his right hand, intending to forcefully destroy it. However, before he could succeed, a powerful surge of sword chi flashed across his eyes. Voila! The right hand's middle finger was severed from the major knuckle, and the storage ring fell to the ground as well. If I am not mistaken, the cultivation technique that he had imparted to Song Zhen is in here. Zhang Xian said coldly. I'll check it right now. Guild leader Zhong walked forward and picked up the storage ring on the ground. With a surge of jinqi, he erased the soul imprint on the storage ring before immersing his consciousness into it. A moment later, a book suddenly materialized in his hand. Flipping it open, his face gradually grew darker and darker, to the point that it seemed as if he might just explode on the spot. With gritted teeth, he passed it over to Song Zhen by the side. Is this the cultivation technique that you practice? Song Zhen took the book and browsed through it. A few moments later, he nodded. That's right. This is the cultivation technique that he imparted to us back then. Holding the book tightly in his grasp, guild leader Zhong turned his gaze back upon Sun Jin. Is there anything else that you have to say for yourself? Knowing that he was done for, Sun Jin's knees fell onto the ground in despair. It might have been possible for him to argue his way out of this a moment ago, but with that cultivation technique manual coming to the surface, there was no way he could do so anymore. That was irrefutable evidence of his wrongdoing. Greed blinded my eyes. I thought that if I could find a way to procure the valuable ores lying all around Fire Source City, I would be able to accrue a huge fortune for myself. Even if I were to retire in the future, I will be able to enjoy a life of luxury. For your life of luxury, you cast aside your morals and harmed so many innocent young children. How dare you call yourself a blacksmith? How dare you call yourself a teacher? Guild leader Zhong roared vehemently. While blacksmiths weren't master teachers, they had their own heritage that they passed down from generation to generation as well. As such, teaching was something they viewed with solemnity and sanctity as well. Yet, the fellow before him had actually used nurturing the next generation as an excuse to commit grievous atrocities. This was going beyond the ethical bottom line of all blacksmiths. With a tap of his finger, guild leader Zhong sealed Sun Jin's cultivation before turning to Zhang Xian and Feng Yihui, saying, Principal Zhang, Pavilion Master Feng, it is me putting my trust in the wrong person and failing to keep my subordinate in check that allowed for atrocities. I shall resign from my position as the leader of the Blacksmith Guild and spend the rest of my life compensating the families of the 30 deceased apprentices. As the leader of the Blacksmith Guild, it was a huge breach of responsibility of his that Sun Jin had been able to act as he pleased for more than 2 whole decades, harming not only Song Zhen but many more apprentices as well. Even though those apprentices had long passed away, they were bound to have kin and friends still living. To make up for his failure, he had decided to dedicate his entire life to making up for this mistake. You aren't the perpetrator, but you do have a heavy responsibility to play in this matter. Zhang Xian said with his hands behind his back. While the crime had not been committed by guild leader Zhong, it was a fact that he was the one who had failed to notice Sun Jin's misdeeds and granted him the authority of an elder. The greater power that Sun Jin wielded had made it even more difficult for anyone to stand up against him, thus emboldening him to harm even more people. For one, there was no way Sun Jin could have been able to hide the deaths of so many of his apprentices if not for the power granted to him. In this sense, guild leader Zhong wasn't free from blame either. I understand. It is a pity that there is nothing I can really do to make it up to them. After saying those words, guild leader Zhong shot a glance at Song Zhen and sighed wearily. Putting aside the deceased apprentices, Even for the middle-aged man before him, there was nothing he could do that could salvage the damage done to him. The cultivation technique that the other party practiced was fundamentally at odds with the earth flames. Even as a 6-star pinnacle blacksmith, there was nothing he could do that could change that. That might not necessarily be so. Noting guild leader Zhong's gestures, Zhang Xian could somewhat fathom a guess on what the other party was thinking about. Walking up to Song Zhen, he stretched out his hand and said, "Pass the book to me for a moment." "Yes." Nodding, Song Zhen respectfully passed the cultivation technique manual that had just been procured from Sun Jin's storage ring to Zhang Xian. Taking the book, Zhang Xian casually flipped through it before lowering his head contemplatively. A moment later, he took out a book and a brush and began writing swiftly. A few moments later, he had already written out a brand new cultivation technique. He passed it over to Song Zhen and said, "Cultivate according to the method written here." By this point, Song Zhen had already made sense of everything that had just happened. The gaze that he directed towards Sun Jin was devoid of the respect it had before, replaced with endless hostility. It was with a heart filled with hope that he had become the other party's apprentice. For more than 20 years, it was the hope that he harbored that drove him on, allowing him to persevere through even the toughest of times. However, the more hope one harbored, the greater the despair upon failure. When Song Zhen took the book from Zhang Xian's hands, his mind was completely blank. He was very grateful toward Principal Zhang for bringing him justice, but having the goal that he had spent his entire life striving for being deemed impossible all of a sudden had left him completely lost. He had no idea what he should do from there onward. "I have said that I will make you a blacksmith. I never renege on my promises." Zhang Xian chuckled softly. "Once you are done cultivating the cultivation technique I have written down, you will be ready to take the 5-star or even the 6-star blacksmith examination." 5-star. 6-star. Song Zhen was flabbergasted by what he was hearing. He dared not believe what Zhang Xian had said to be true. "That's right." Zhang Xian nodded with a smile. Song Zhen hurriedly flipped open the book in his hand. The faint aroma from the slightly damp ink and the elegant calligraphy, which seemed as if they would leap out from the pages at any moment, calmed his unsettled mind. It didn't take him too long to finish reading through the entire book. By the time he was done, his body had already gone completely still, unable to believe what he had just seen. The fact that he had attained the incredible strength of a transcendent mortal Anin Dan in his 30s without the guidance of a master teacher was testimony to the incredible talent he possessed in cultivation. Even though he had only swiftly browsed through the manual once, he could already imagine the frightening might one could potentially harness after mastering it. Not only would it resolve the conflict between the attribute of his Jinqi and the earth flames, it would even bring his cultivation to greater heights. Seeing the daze Song Zhen was in, Zhang Xian urged him on with a smile. "You should start cultivating now." "Yes." Without any hesitation, Song Zhen hurriedly sat onto the floor and began cultivating according to the method recorded on the book. After Song Zhen began cultivating, Zhang Xian turned his gaze toward guild leader Zhong and said, "I will need to trouble you to find 3 grade 6 pills for me. They are namely the Bone Reinforcing Body Tempering Pill, Great Reversal Meridian Reconstruction Pill." As Song Zhen had practiced the cultivation technique from Sun Jin for more than 20 years now, it was no easy feat to alter his meridians and change the attribute of his Jinqi. Just the cultivation technique that Zhang Xian had tailored for him wouldn't suffice to make him a blacksmith. It was necessary to complement the cultivation technique with some pills as well. Reconstructing the meridians to change the attribute of a Jinqi that was at odds with the earth flames previously to complement it instead was a feat that would have been impossible for anyone else to pull off. Only he, who cultivated the perfect heaven's path divine art, was capable of calculating a method that could resolve the issue. These pills might have been difficult to find anywhere else, but they aren't too uncommon in Firesource City. "I will get it done right now," Guild leader Zhong said before rushing off. A city built on a land rich in earth flames, blacksmiths and apothecaries there possessed an inherent advantage given the nature of their craft, thus making them the most popular occupations in Firesource City. Furthermore, there were many precious medicinal herbs in the area. So, pills that would have been difficult to find anywhere else could easily be found within this city. It didn't take too long for guild leader Zhong to return with the 3 pills Zhang Xian spoke of. Zhang Xian passed the 3 pills to Song Zhen and gave him specific instructions on when he should consume them while cultivating. An hour later, a resounding buzz suddenly sounded from Song Zhen's body, and his aura abruptly surged. Within this short period of time, not only did he manage to change the attribute of his Jinqi, he had even succeeded in achieving a breakthrough to half-saint. Chapter 1026, Reforging the Golden Origin Cauldron Miracle. It is indeed a miracle. Guild leader Zhong muttered with a face dazed with astonishment. With just a cultivation technique and 3 pills, a person had actually managed to change the attribute of his Jinqi and achieve a breakthrough while he was at it. This was already a feat that could be considered a miracle. Despite witnessing the entire process with his own eyes, he still couldn't help but feel as if he had been dreaming. The matter was just too inconceivable for him. This is the prowess of Principal Zhang. Pavilion Master Feng was also shocked beyond words. As a 6-star pinnacle master teacher, he possessed an eye of discernment far superior to those of his peers. Naturally, he could also tell how valuable the cultivation technique that had been imparted to Song Zhen was. To create such a formidable cultivation technique within moments and give it away unreservedly to another. This was how a true master teacher should act. Here was a role model that all master teachers should strive to be like. It was no wonder he could become the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy at such a young age and win the respect and admiration of all elders and students. Indeed, there was no mediocre man beneath a true legend. Thank you, teacher. Song Zhen completed his cultivation while the duo was still overwhelmed with shock, and he hurriedly rushed up to Zhang Xian and kneeled before him respectfully. At this moment, he was filled with nothing but gratitude and admiration for the young man before him, such that he would even end his life without any hesitation at a word from the other party. I am not your teacher, so there is no need for you to be so courteous around me. Zhang Xian waved his hands. You have taught me such a valuable cultivation technique and given me the strength to continue living on. You are the only teacher I will acknowledge in my life, and this won't change until death. Kneeling on the ground, Song Zhen kowtowed several times with unshakable resolve in his eyes. Without the other party, he would have been nothing more than a cold corpse lying in an alley. His family would still have been mocked by others for his incompetence. Sun Jin would still have been the high and mighty elder he was, and the atrocities he had committed would eventually have been buried amid the dust of history. Perhaps, countless other apprentices who had harbored hopes as great as his would have ended up walking in the same footsteps as him as well. Principal Zhang hadn't just taught him a cultivation technique, he had changed his life. Even if the other party was unwilling to take him in as his student, he would still view the other party as his teacher, and this wouldn't change until death. Seeing the determination in the Song Zhen's eyes, Zhang Xian eventually nodded in agreement. Very well then. I can't take you in as my direct disciple, but since the workings of fate have brought us together, I shall take you in as my blacksmith student. To accept a direct disciple was a heavy commitment. Song Zhen might have been extremely talented, but Zhang Xian valued character far more than anything else. Given how short a time he had spent with the other party, it was still too early for something like that. Nevertheless, it was fine for him to take the other party in as his blacksmith student. After all, the responsibility of a master teacher was to spread their knowledge across the world, so it wasn't rare for master teachers to have innumerable students. In a sense, this was similar to his relationship with the members of the Xianxian faction as well. Thus, it wasn't anything much for Zhang Xian to take Song Zhen in as his student. Hearing those words, Song Zhen hurriedly kowtowed earnestly in agitation. Thank you, teacher. Seeing such a sight, looks of envy surfaced on the faces of the blacksmiths gathered around the area, and this was no exception even for the elders and guild leader Zhong as well. It was apparent that Principal Zhang possessed an unfathomable understanding of smithing. One who was able to become his student, even if just in name, would surely have a boundless future ahead of them. Ignoring the looks from the crowd, Zhang Xian said with a smile, "As your blacksmith teacher, it would be unbecoming of me if I didn't do something for you." Flicking his wrist, a massive cauldron fell to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. This is the Guardian Saint artifact of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, a Saint Lotier artifact, the Golden Origin Cauldron. I intended to reforge it once more, but since you are my student, I will be leaving this job to you. This experience should do you much good in your future endeavors as a blacksmith, and even becoming a 7-star blacksmith shouldn't be a problem to you in the future. You want me to reforge a Saint Lotier artifact? This. But I am only an apprentice. I have never successfully smithied a mortal tier weapon before, I can't possibly take on such a heavy responsibility. Song Zhen was scared out of his wits. The other blacksmiths in the room, including guild leader Zhong, also nearly fainted from the sheer ridiculousness of what they were witnessing. A saint-tier artifact was something that only 7-star blacksmiths were qualified to come into contact with. Being able to work with one would indeed allow one to make huge progress as a blacksmith, be it in terms of skill or state of mind. This was especially so for 6-star pinnacle blacksmiths. This experience might very well have opened a brand new window for them into smithing, thus becoming the impetus for them to make a breakthrough. But, to allow an apprentice who hadn't even succeeded in smithing a mortal tier weapon before to work with it. Was the other party really not afraid of breaking the Saint Guardian artifact of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy? Master, you can't be serious. Not only were the crowd acting in such a manner, even the Golden Origin Cauldron itself was on the brink of tears. Actually, I think that my current cultivation is wonderful as it is, there is no need for me to make another breakthrough. It did want to make a breakthrough, but only if it was done through its master's hands would it be able to rest assured. To allow a fellow who has never successfully smithied a weapon in his life to work on it instead. What the heck is that? Did I do something that so greatly offended you recently that you had to find such a reason to do me in? Enough. What is with this nonsense that you are spouting? Paying no heed to the horrified Golden Origin Cauldron, Zhang Xian waved his hand. Even though his current mastery as a blacksmith was indeed at 6-star pinnacle, the reforging of the Golden Origin Cauldron didn't just involve refining and quenching. More importantly, the violet gilt metal would have to be smithied into the Golden Origin Cauldron, a task that involved forging. And that happened to be something that he wasn't good at. If he were to really attempt to reforge the Golden Origin Cauldron before so many formidable blacksmiths, not only would it be embarrassing for him, the Golden Origin Cauldron could very well be hammered out of shape in his hands, possibly becoming an unseemly slab of metal. While Song Zhen was only an apprentice, Zhang Xian could tell through how the other party forged his sword earlier that he had all of the basics down. Perhaps it was due to his inability to handle flames, Song Zhen seemed to have focused all of his efforts in refining his forging skills, granting him a forging mastery that was on par or even superior to most 6-star blacksmiths. Without a doubt, the other party was the ideal candidate to smith the violet gilt metal into the Golden Origin Cauldron. With this success, Song Zhen would be able to gain a deep insight into smithing. It would only be a matter of time before he became a 6-star blacksmith or even beyond that. Through this, not only would Zhang Xian be able to avoid any embarrassment due to his inability to forge weapons, he would also be able to portray himself as an unfathomable expert, thus deepening the respect others had for him. More importantly, he could temper this newly accepted student of his while he was at it. In a sense, it was like killing 3 birds with 1 stone, so why not? Yes. Seeing that his teacher had gotten angry at his hesitance, Song Zhen dared not say any more. Nodding, he plucked up his courage and walked over, facing the Golden Origin Cauldron with an ashen face. On the other hand, the Golden Origin Cauldron was shaking uncontrollably, devoid of the haughtiness and arrogance it usually commanded when it crushed Saint Realm experts. Its 3 thick legs were trembling so much that it seemed as if they would cave in at any moment. Seeing the states that the man and cauldron were in, Zhang Xian shook his head. Without wasting any time, he began issuing instructions. The reforging of the golden origin cauldron is an extremely important task. I will be issuing you instructions, so make sure to follow them carefully. There is no room for mistakes here. Yes. Hearing that Zhang Xian would be guiding him along, Song Zhen heaved a sigh of relief. Take out the violet gilt metal I had you bring along earlier, you will need it in the forging process. After the preparations were done, Zhang Xian began issuing more detailed instructions to Song Zhen. First, place the violet gilt ore into the cauldron and drive the earth flames with your jinqi for 13 breaths so as to melt it. 13 breaths later, place the golden origin cauldron inside and begin fusing the two together. 27 breaths later, take the resulting alloy out and use the 1000 metal forging technique to hammer the golden origin cauldron 184 times, not one more, not one less. Make sure to hammer it all over, and every strike must consist of only 80% of your full strength. Instead of using jinqi telepathy, Zhang Xian said the instructions out loud. Hearing the instructions, the blacksmiths in the area glanced at one another with shocked faces. They had thought that the instructions that Zhang Xian would be issuing Song Zhen would be simple, basic ones. However, after hearing those words, they realized that they had been utterly wrong. Never in the world had they seen such precise smithing before. How in the world could the other party issue such detailed instructions? That would require a thorough understanding of the golden origin cauldron, violet gilt metal, and even the properties of the earth flames. Not just that, the other party had to know Song Zhen's capability and strength inside out. This wasn't something that could be achieved with just outstanding eye of discernment alone. The sheer number of calculations required in doing so were bound to be at a fearsome level as well. Yes. Hearing those words, Song Zhen suddenly had a feeling that his teacher might have calculated the entire smithing process from the start to the end, and he couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Swiftly memorizing what was being said, he grabbed the violet gilt metal ore by the side and tossed it into the cauldron. In the blacksmith guild, there was nearly no room that didn't have a formation that was connected straight to the earth flames beneath the ground. Driving his newfound strength as a half-saint, flames surged from the ground, and before long, the violet gilt metal had melted. Following which, Song Zhen placed the golden origin cauldron inside. All kinds of procedures were carried out strictly to Zhang Xian's demands, without the slightest deviation. Not bad. Zhang Xian nodded in satisfaction. As he had expected, the other party's mastery in forging had indeed reached the level of a true master. Even most 6-star pinnacle blacksmiths would struggle to match him. His 24 years of hard work hadn't been futile. It was only due to his unyielding perseverance even in the face of failure that he had managed to achieve such a level of skill. An hour later, a resounding chime reverberated from the golden origin cauldron's body, and its Saint Lotier prowess began rising steadily. At that moment, an overwhelming aura burst into the surroundings, forcing the surrounding spectators to retreat continuously. Who? A few moments later, the aura was reined back in. The golden origin cauldron carried a lofty air around it and a brilliant glow. Saint Intermediate Tier Artifact. Good job. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. With just a look, he knew that he had made the right call. The current golden origin cauldron had managed to fuse perfectly with the violet gilt metal, reaching the level of a Saint Intermediate Tier artifact, granting its strength on par with Saint 4 Dan pinnacle experts. If he were to meet the Golden Leaf King and the others once more, he would easily be able to subdue them with just a devastating crush from his cauldron. With this, the days when he would have to go through so much effort talking others into drinking his wine were finally over. I am still alive. Not only am I still alive, my cultivation has risen as well. Wonderful. While Zhang Xian was feeling glad, the golden origin cauldron began pouncing about excitedly. With a mere apprentice blacksmith working on it, it had thought that certain doom was awaiting it. Who could have known that, Not only would the smithing be successful, its cultivation would even rise by a greater extent than it had initially envisioned. At this moment, it was so happy that it could hug Song Zhen and give him a good kiss. Teacher. At the same time, Song Zhen also hadn't expected that he would succeed. An agitated glint rippled in his eyes, revealing the immense joy and delight he felt from his success. While a huge reason for his success was due to his teacher guiding him along step by step, this experience had still given him a deep insight into smithing. As long as he could raise his cultivation to the required level, the 7-star blacksmith examination wasn't beyond reach. It could be said that, this single experience had built his foundations in smithing. As long as he continued working hard, his future accomplishments would be boundless. In order to give him such an experience, his teacher had unhesitatingly entrusted the Saint Guardian artifact of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy to him. To have such deep trust in him, this favor was something that he would never be able to repay in his lifetime. Alright. As long as you internalize this experience, you should be able to advance to great heights as a blacksmith in the future. With a grab, Zhang Xian returned the golden origin cauldron to his storage ring before waving his hand. Pavilion Master Feng, I will be taking my leave first. I will be counting on you to take care of the other matters here. After saying those words, he turned around and walked away. Before long, he had already disappeared from view. Departing with a fling of the sleeves after the job is done, asking for no compensation in return for his efforts. This is a true master teacher. Seeing how Zhang Xian departed without the slightest hesitation, such thoughts emerged within the minds of the remaining crowd. Chapter 1027, I went easy on you just now. Right after leaving the blacksmith guild, Zhang Xian smiled softly. He had only intended to prevent an innocent life from being lost, but who knew that he would end up managing to fulfill his promise to the golden origin cauldron while he was at it, rising its cultivation significantly. On top of that, he had even found himself a talented blacksmith student. It could be said that the trouble he had gone through was well worth the rewards. As for how Sun Jin would be dealt with, that had nothing to do with him. Nevertheless, there was no doubt that Sun Jin would have to pay a heavy price for the sins that he had committed. The death penalty would likely be on the table. As much as Zhang Xian hated to kill, he felt that there was no need to show mercy to those who trampled on their own students in the hope of elevating themselves. Back when Zhang Xian first arrived in the world, he had nary a care in the world. As long as a matter was none of his business, he would view it with perfect nonchalance, never involving himself in anything that would spell trouble. However, after everything he had gone through, he had already become a true master teacher at heart. He had begun to understand the heavy responsibilities that he bore, and he intended to live up to them as well. At this moment, Zhang Xian suddenly recalled what had happened earlier in the night. Right, I wonder if Luo Shi is angry at me. I should rush back to take a look. He slapped his forehead in distress before hurriedly rushing toward Luo Ruoxin's residence. It had not been easy for him to close the distance between the both of them, and he didn't wish for them to return to square one due to this matter. He should have held himself back the previous night. Why had he been so brazen as to hold the other party's hand? Hopefully, the other party wouldn't blame him for this matter. With a conflicted mind, Zhang Xian hurried his footsteps, and before long, Luo Ruoxin's residence was within sights. Before he could arrive at the entrance, he saw a young man walking straight toward him. It was the battle-fanatic 1,000-men commander of the Combat Master Hall who had challenged him earlier in the day, Feng Sun. Caught up over the Combat Master Hall's loss to the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, the other party had been trying to challenge him for a while now, and that had left him deeply troubled. As such, upon seeing Feng Sun walk over, Zhang Xian immediately tried to find a place where he could hide. However, before he could do so, the other party had already caught sight of him and immediately rushed up, his eyes blazing with fighting will. Principal Zhang, do you dare have a match with me? I will suppress my cultivation to that of your level. Feng Sun challenged with a loud voice. Zhang Xian was conflicted. He had intended to quickly find Luo Ruoxin to apologize to her, but judging from how Feng Sun was acting, it was apparent that the other party wasn't going to allow him to pass if he rejected the duel. Out of consideration for his standing, the other party had not forced the matter the previous time. However, for some reason, the other party was extremely insistent on having their duel this time round. Sighing deeply, Zhang Xian relented. Waving his hand, he said, "Very well. If you suppress your cultivation, I will have a duel with you. However, it will just be a friendly spar." Considering how determined the other party was, he knew that it was only a matter of time before this duel would be held. Good. Receiving the other party's agreement, Feng Sun's eyes lit up. He swiftly suppressed his cultivation from Saint 3 Dan Pinnacle to Nascent Saint Pinnacle. Hong Long. Amidst a powerful gust of wind, he charged right toward Zhang Xian. Rewinding back to the moment when Zhang Xian and Luo Ruoxin separated. With a face tinged with redness, the young lady hurriedly returned to her residence. She had lived by herself from a very young age, and never once had she really come into contact with a man before. As such, when she was touched by the other party, she flew into a fluster. After walking a distance away, she turned around to take a look, only to find that Zhang Xian had not followed her. A frown of displeasure emerged on her face. This was her first time meeting someone that dense. She was embarrassed by the touch, not angry. Those who had the slightest bit of emotional intelligence would know that this was the moment to rush up to apologize. This was the perfect opportunity for the other party to get closer to her, and she could also use the chance to resolve the awkwardness from before. Yet, that fellow had actually disappeared from sight. That pig-headed fool. It was only a 10-minute walk from the tavern where they had eaten earlier, and yet, despite waiting for 2 whole hours, the other party was still nowhere to be seen. Rage dyed her face a shade of pink. Giving up on waiting for the fellow, Luo Ruoxin returned to her residence, only to see Mu Shi waiting outside for her. Luo Shi. What is the matter? Luo Ruoxin frowned. Mu Shi hesitated for a brief moment before speaking. It's like this. I have just received news that there could very well be otherworldly demon kings in the ancient domain, so. Luo Shi, won't you consider backing out of the expedition team? Are you trying to order me? Luo Ruoxin asked with a cold face. I dare not. Mu Shi was horrified. That had better be true. Luo Ruoxin waved her hands coldly as she walked past Mu Shi to open the doors to her residence. However, flurried footsteps sounded at that moment, and turning around, she saw a young man heading toward her. It was Feng Sun from the Combat Master Hall. From the moment he first met Luo Ruoxin, he had been already spellbound by her beauty. He had been trying to find a way to get close to her, but the other party had never granted him such an opportunity. However, with the ancient domain opening tomorrow and knowing that he could very well lose his life within, he eventually built up his courage and rushed over. Seeing the young lady's silhouette, Feng Sun yelled, "Luo Shi." Luo Ruoxin had disguised herself, and Feng Sun didn't wield the power to see through it either. Nevertheless, she was still an outstanding beauty even with her disguise on, possessing grace that was on par with Hu Yaoyao and the others. It was no wonder Feng Sun found himself mesmerized by her. I have something that I wish to say to you. Feng Sun exclaimed. Luo Ruoxin turned around and said, Say your piece. Right here. Feng Sun glanced at Mu Shi and his surroundings awkwardly, unsure of what he should do. On the other hand, seeing that Feng Sun wasn't saying a word, Luo Ruoxin couldn't be bothered either. Turning around, she opened the door and stepped into her residence. Wait a moment. I will speak. I will speak. Knowing that he might not have another opportunity, Feng Sun gritted his teeth and stepped forward. From the moment I caught sight of you, I was already enchanted by your charm. Luo Shi, won't you walk down the long path of cultivation alongside me? Feng Sun had a straightforward personality, and he didn't like to hide anything inside of him. Thus, his words were very direct as well. Send our guest off. Luo Ruoxin had been wondering what important matters the other party was going to speak of when she heard those words. She waved her hand before turning around to return to her residence. Luo, sure, I haven't finished my piece yet. Not expecting the other party to leave without giving him a proper reply, Feng Sun hurriedly rushed up. However, before he could follow the other party into the residence, Mu Shi had already blocked his way. Combat Master Feng, please return for now. Feng Sun panicked. Noting that Feng Sun was unwilling to give up, Mu Shi frowned in displeasure. Luo Shi has already made her stand very clear by turning you away at the door. Those words were like a pail of cold water, extinguishing the flames in Feng Sun's heart. Indeed. He had already made things very clear, but the other party was still unwilling to allow him to enter. This was already a direct response to his confession. He would only be embarrassing himself further by pestering the other party. Pardon my disturbance. Understanding this much, Feng Sun trudged away with a disconsolate look on his face. However, before he could get far, he saw Zhang Xian rushing over in his direction. That fellow seems to be rather close with Luo Shi. Could she have rejected me because of him? Such an idea suddenly popped into Feng Sun's head, and it swiftly grew and consumed his mind. Unable to hold himself back anymore, he rushed over to block Zhang Xian's path, thus resulting in the current situation. Naturally, Zhang Xian was unaware that the reason the other party was confronting him. Seeing the other party suppressing his cultivation to his level, he couldn't help but feel slightly embarrassed. To be facing the other party with his cultivation suppressed to the same level as him. Wasn't that as good as bullying the other party? But in any case, that fellow was the one who had proposed it. After a short internal struggle, Zhang Xian felt that he should be magnanimous and go along with the other party's demand instead. I will bring you down. Roaring coldly, Feng Sun raised his fist and rushed forward. He had already heard from Liao Sun and the others that the young man before him possessed an unfathomable level of mastery in battle techniques. Thus, he decided to exploit his greatest expertise right from the start, speed. Of the martial arts in the world, none were infallible, except for speed. Speed happened to be what he specialized in, and as long as he made full use of it, given his superior combat instincts, he didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to defeat the other party. Who? Carrying immense pressure that threatened to burst even the air, his fist arrived before Zhang Xian in the blink of an eye. He had thought that his amazing speed would leave the other party flustered, but to his shock, the other party was stretching his back lazily. In the crucial moment of a battle, instead of dodging or retaliating, you are choosing to stretch your back lazily instead? What do you mean by that? Despite being bewildered by the nonsensical action before him, Feng Sun's fist didn't have the slightest intention of halting at all. However, before his fist could arrive at its target, the other party suddenly stopped stretching his back, and a palm abruptly flew toward him, as if striking down a pesky fly. Pada! He was sent tumbling into the distance. Under the immense might of the slap, his face immediately bruised red. Truthfully, in the moment he had seen the slap, he had already begun carrying out evasive maneuvers. Yet, no matter what he did, he simply couldn't get himself out of the trajectory of the slap, as if there was some compelling power that drew the other party's palm to his face. Damn it! For a combat master like him to be struck flying with but a slap, it wasn't too hard to imagine the immense frustration he must have felt. He immediately got back to his feet, intending to charge over to return the favor, but at that moment, the other party waved his hand in exasperation and said, "Why don't we just let this matter go? There is really no need for us to fight. How can we end this duel without determining the victor?" In Feng Sun's eyes, it seemed like Zhang Xian was trying to have mercy on him, and that left him even more enraged. With a furious roar, he charged forward once more. The next moment, his neck was caught by the other party's left palm, and a right palm struck his face relentlessly. The next moment, Feng Sun was lying on the ground, and the other party was sitting on his back. Both fists of the other party rained down on him, as if a cotton farmer scutching one a bed of cotton. The next moment, the talented combat master was lying on the ground, clutching his head tightly to his body. The other party was standing before him, kicking him mercilessly. Let's just end it here. I think this should be sufficient to consider it your loss. 10 minutes later, seeing how Feng Sun was completely bruised from head to toe, Zhang Xian couldn't bring himself to strike anymore. He had already gone easy on the other party, but the other party was simply too weak. There wasn't the slightest feeling of accomplishment he felt from pummeling the other party. Shaking his head, Zhang Xian walked past Feng Sun, and after knocking on the door, he entered Luo Ruoxin's residence. The young lady hadn't rested for the night yet. She was standing in the main hall, deeply contemplating something. On the other hand, Mu Shi was standing at an area not too far away from her with his head lowered respectfully. Zhang Xian hesitated for a moment before speaking. Just now, Please leave. I intend to rest now. Luo Ruoxin waved her hand coldly. Seeing how he was evicted right after arriving, Zhang Xian was at a complete loss as to what he should do. His eyes couldn't help but swim toward Mu Shi. After a moment of hesitation, Mu Shi coughed slightly before offering a friendly warning. Senior uncle, Feng Sun was chased away right after he confessed just a moment ago. Luo Shi isn't in a good mood at the moment. Confessed? A deep frown appeared on Zhang Xian's forehead. That's right. Mu Shi nodded. Pardon me for a moment, I have some matters that I have to deal with right now. Turning around, Zhang Xian left Luo Ruoxin's residence. Matters that you have to deal with right now? Mu Shi was stunned. I just had a spar with Feng Sun, but thinking back, I think that it was disrespectful of me to have gone easy on someone who has challenged me so earnestly. I should at least give him a taste of the full extent of my might. Shortly after Zhang Xian left, screams of agony from a certain talented combat master resounded in the night. Feng Sun had just been viciously pummeled, such that he could hardly bring himself to his feet to leave. How could he possibly be a match for the energetic Zhang Xian? I didn't see anything, Mu Shi mumbled beneath his breath, and he averted his gaze. On the other hand, the eyes of the young lady not too far away curled into beautiful crescents. Pfft, a chuckle escaped her lips. Chapter 1028, Opening of the Ancient Domain. At this moment, the thought of ending his life flashed through Feng Sun's mind. He had thought that the other party had already exerted the full extent of his strength in the duel they had just a moment ago, but he realized that the other party hadn't even displayed a fifth of his true might. In other words, with just a small portion of his strength, the other party was already able to crush him easily. Yet, somehow provoked by something, the other party was going all out against him at this very moment. Without a doubt, there was no way he could withstand the other party's strength. Under the vicious pummeling, he found that even his desire to live had been beaten out of him. Honestly speaking. What the heck is this? Didn't you say that it was just a friendly spar? On top of that, you had already won earlier. To rush back here to pummel me once more, what is going on? Seeing how the other party was continuing to pummel him, Feng Sun couldn't stand it any longer. Releasing the cap on his cultivation, he raised his cultivation to Saint 1 Dan. The outcome was that, there was no difference at all. He was still getting pummeled without fail. What left him on the verge of spurting blood was that the other party didn't seem to have even noticed that his strength had increased. Clenching his jaws, he raised his cultivation up to Saint 2 Dan, but, the outcome still wasn't any different. He was still getting pummeled viciously. He was 1,000-men commander of the Combat Master Hall, a top-notch genius who boasted the greatest fighting prowess among his peers. He could knock down even opponents stronger than him, and yet, even when his cultivation was 2 realms stronger than the fellow before him, he was still no match for the other party at all. The crushing blow to his pride left him on the verge of insanity. Forget it, to hell with my pride and dignity. With a look of savagery, Feng Sun cast away his final shred of hesitation and released his full might. With the entirety of his strength as a Saint 3 Dan pinnacle expert released, an incredible force burst forth from him, rattling even the sky. I will make you pay the price for your insolence. Roaring furiously, he raised his fist to strike the other party, but before he could do so, the sight before him turned dark. A leg had already arrived in front of his face. Putting aside the immense strength that the kick harnessed, it was even aimed toward one of his cultivation Ming men. Barely a moment after he had roared excitedly, he was already back to convulsing powerlessly on the ground. In that instant, an epiphany struck him: treasure your life, distance yourself from Zhang Xian. He carried the reputation of a genius as well, but he didn't even come close to the level of the young man before him. There was a world of difference between their capabilities. It was no wonder his direct disciple was qualified to challenge the progeny of combat selection, and even a feeble-looking student whom he had barely begun teaching could floor the members of their combat master hall. The young man before him was a true monster. After knocking Feng Sun out, Zhang Xian finally succeeded in venting the frustrations within him. Stretching his back lazily, he felt refreshed once more. Turning around, he returned to Luo Ruoxin's residence. However, before he could enter the residence, he saw Mu Shi walking out from the doors. Senior uncle, Luo Shi has already retired for the night. She has said to leave whatever you have to say until tomorrow. Ah. Hearing that Luo Ruoxin didn't intend to meet him, Zhang Xian could only return to his residence while scratching his head. The night felt exceptionally long. When dawn arrived, everyone was already gathered in the main hall of the Master Teacher Pavilion. After a night of recuperation, Feng Sun had mostly recovered from the pummeling he had suffered the previous night, but the swelling all over his body hadn't disappeared yet. Upon seeing Feng Sun's current state, the leader of the expedition, Guild Leader Han, asked worriedly, "Combat Master Feng, what happened? Can you still join the expedition in your current state? The other party had been fine the day before, so how did he end up in such a state overnight?" Feng Sun hurriedly waved his hands. "I'm fine, I only met with some problems in my cultivation last night. I have already taken some medicine, so it won't pose any trouble. To challenge a nascent saint and end up being pummeled badly instead. Even if someone were to threaten him with a knife on his throat, he would still be too embarrassed to admit it." "You met with some problems in your cultivation?" Guild Leader Han shook his head. He was not a master teacher, but that didn't mean he was a fool. How could someone end up with swelling all over his body from cultivation? It was apparent that he had been beaten up. Nevertheless, since the other party was unwilling to speak, he wasn't interested in prying any further either. Thus, he quickly scanned through the crowd before nodding. "All right. Since everyone is here, let's head over." The seal to the ancient domain was about to open, so it was time for them to set off. Riding on the back of the Saint Beast, Zhang Xian secretly sneaked Luo Ruoxin a peek. Noting the composed look on the other party's face, seemingly not blaming him for the matter yesterday, he heaved a sigh of relief internally before heading up to her. "Luo Shi, there are many dangers lurking in the ancient domain. Why don't we team up together so that we can look after one another?" "Sure." Luo Ruoxin nodded. "That's great." Taking Luo Ruoxin's acceptance of his request as a sign to indicate that she wasn't angry at him, Zhang Xian let out another sigh of relief. A few minutes later, the massive swallow-embracing mountain came into sight once more. The crowd landed on the ground. The seal didn't seem to be much different than how it had been a few days earlier. The flag that Zhang Xian had planted in the ground was still sitting quietly amid the formation, and surges of powerful energy were being released into the surroundings. "According to my calculations, the seal will be opening today. However, I am not certain of the exact timing, so we will have to wait patiently," Guild Leader Han explained. To be able to calculate the day of the opening of such a powerful seal was already an incredible feat in itself. To calculate its timing on top of that would be demanding too much from Guild Leader Han. Understanding this fact, the crowd waited patiently on the spot. Around 2 hours later, some changes began occurring to the mist-like seal. The entire depression first turned crimson with a 7-colored bridge abruptly materializing before everyone's eyes. It's opening. Upon noticing the changes, the eyes of the crowd lit up. Guild leader Han stepped forward to assess the situation in front for a moment before turning around to brief the crowd on the happenings. That 7-colored bridge is the key to entering the seal. It will only appear for around 15 minutes, so we should quickly enter. After saying those words, he took the lead. The others quickly followed suit. While the 7-colored bridge was made out of the energy harnessed by the formation, it didn't feel unsteady or wobbly in the least. On the contrary, it was exceptionally sturdy. Walking on it felt no different from walking anywhere else, it didn't feel dangerous at all. Following behind the crowd, Zhang Xian stepped onto the 7-colored bridge. The scenery around him, an azure sky with fleeting white clouds accompanied by a verdant mountain and an emerald lake, formed a stark contrast to the world beneath his feet, a dark abyss with occasional bursts of searing currents. Such vastly different existences placed together formed quite a mystical sight, leaving Zhang Xian feeling as if he was standing on the intersection between two worlds. To construct such a sturdy bridge out of emptiness, the person who created the ancient domain sure is fearsome, Zhang Xian remarked internally. Zhang Xian was also capable of constructing a bridge that one could walk on out of his jinqi, but to do so through a formation that was far beyond his current capability. It wasn't just him, even 7-star formation masters would be incapable of such a feat. It seemed like Zhang Xian's prior guess was right. The elder who had left behind the ancient domain was, at the very least, an 8-star formation master. It was no wonder the old principal was so wary, leaving even a tombstone behind for himself in the Master Teacher Academy out of fear that he would never return. Eye of Insight. While Zhang Xian proceeded forward, he focused his eyes toward the very end of the bridge. Over there, a 7-colored light barrier was positioned perpendicularly to the bridge. Crimson lava flurried beyond the barrier, generating an immense amount of heat that seemed as if it would reduce any man to ash. After studying it for a moment, Zhang Xian frowned. The structure of the light barrier, there is some resemblance to the seal in the subterranean gallery. Zhang Xian couldn't help but feel that there was something uncanny about the light barrier, so he took a closer look. To his astonishment, he realized that it was nearly identical to the seal he had seen in the subterranean gallery, the only difference being that the one before him was a simplified version. Nevertheless, it still harnessed incredible power that prevented anyone from barging through it forcefully. As long as it didn't open up, it would be impossible for anyone to enter. Otherwise, the seal in the subterranean gallery wouldn't have kept the otherworldly demonic tribe at bay for several dozen millenniums either, only allowing a few small fries to slip through its defenses occasionally. Before long, following the crowd in front of him, he arrived before the light barrier. By this point, the others had also caught sight of the scenery that lay ahead of the light barrier, and their faces paled in horror. It's nothing but lava in front. It can't be that. The ancient domain lies in the midst of the lava, one of the master teachers of the expedition exclaimed in shock. With the temperature of the lava, even metal would melt in moments upon contact with it. Even though most members of the expedition had already reached Saint Realm, they still dared not enter such a place haphazardly. The details I know about the ancient domain are severely limited. The only way we can find out is to explore it ourselves. Wu Shi shook his head. Then. Don't think too much about it. Since we are already here, let's just go in and take a look. Wu Shi said. However, there was still some hesitation on the faces of those around him, so after a moment of contemplation, he stepped forward and said, "How about this? I will try it out first, and if I meet with any danger, you all should evacuate the area quickly." On top of being the highest-ranked master teacher among the group, he was the strongest one as well. In face of danger, he was obliged to step forward to protect the others. If even he was unable to face whatever dangers lay within the lava, it was unlikely that the others would be able to either. After saying those words, Wu Shi channeled his jinqi out from his acupoints and wrapped his body with it. Once that was done, he charged straight through the light barrier. Who? Without the slightest impediment, voila, Wu Shi slid through the light barrier and disappeared from everyone's sight. A few moments later, Wu Shi's silhouette emerged once more. His figure was a little indistinct and vague, but his gesture was most certainly beckoning them over. Most likely, there was no danger within. Let's enter, Guild Leader Han said before stepping through the light barrier. Zhang Xian followed suit as well. The light barrier felt slightly viscous, reminiscent of the surface of water. Stepping through it, it was as if he had stepped into another world. Intense heat, as if omnipresent, assaulted him from all directions relentlessly, leaving his skin with a slightly stinging sensation. Gazing downward, he realized that a 10 kilometers wide enormous volcano vent stood beneath him. From time to time, flames would burst forth, threatening to devour the group whole. Is the ancient domain really beneath the lava? Zhang Xian frowned. He had imagined that there would be some kind of passageway beyond the light barrier to lead the group into the ancient domain, but to his bewilderment, there was nothing but lava around him. If the ancient domain was truly located beneath the lava, this expedition would be far more dangerous than he had previously imagined. Putting aside the searing heat harnessed in the lava, just its sheer scale of the lava pool and the inability to see past the opaque lava made it extremely plausible that one could lose their way within, possibly never returning at all. Where do we go? The first person to enter, Wu Shi, turned to Guild Leader Han with a deep frown on his face. The other party was a formation master. Perhaps, there might be some kind of formation hidden in the area that they were supposed to utilize to enter the ancient domain. Let me take a look. Nodding, Guild Leader Han took out a compass and paced around the massive vent of the volcano. Gradually, the frown on his forehead deepened. The spiritual energy current in this area is extremely stable, there is no formation hidden in the area. It seems like we can only slowly explore the area to find the entrance. Explore the area? Looking at the lava pool, which boasted a diameter of 10 kilometers, the lips of the crowd twitched uncontrollably. How were they supposed to explore the area? Were they to dive into the lava? Even if their bodies could endure the heat, their clothes couldn't possibly do the same. A bunch of 6-star and 7-star master teachers and combat masters walking past one another stark naked. The image was so beautiful that it was more likely that they would die of embarrassment before they found the ancient domain. Realizing the same, Zhang Xian subconsciously turned his gaze toward Luo Ruoxin. With a deeply conflicted expression, he mumbled unknowingly beneath his breath, if her clothes were to be burnt as well, should I look, or not look? Just as Zhang Xian was deep in thought over the serious problem he was facing, he suddenly heard a feminine voice quivering with rage beside him. You! What kind of nonsense are you thinking about? Turning his gaze over, he saw Luo Ruoxin's face flushed crimson, seemingly ready to explode at any moment. While others were thinking about how they should find the entrance to the ancient domain, that fellow was assessing her from head to toe. With a look, it was apparent that he was thinking of nothing good. Cough cough. Not expecting that the other party would catch him contemplating over an issue as serious as that, Zhang Xian choked on his saliva. Posturing himself upright, he replied with a dignified tone, I was just thinking that our line of thought might have been wrong in the start. Considering how large the lava pool is, I don't think that we are meant to search every inch of it. So, I have been thinking that it might be a trial from the master of the ancient domain instead. A trial? Realizing that she had misunderstood Zhang Xian when he was contemplating over such serious issues, Luo Ruoxin couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. That's right. Standing in midair, Zhang Xian glanced at the lava pool before him and gestured grandly. If the master of the ancient domain didn't intend for anyone to enter the land he had created, he wouldn't have constructed his formation so that it opened up once in a while, allowing others to enter. Since he has done so, I think that could be taken as a sign that the ancient domain is something that he intended to leave for the later generations, and the lava is most likely the first trial that those who seek the ancient domain have to undergo. Only those who manage to clear this trial will be able to advance further in this Luo Ruoxin pondered over Zhang Xian's words for a moment before nodding in agreement. Zhang Xian's words made perfect sense. A formation master who could create such a powerful seal couldn't have possibly made the grave mistake of having the seal open every now and then. In other words, it was likely that the opening of the seal was an effect that the master of the ancient domain had intended right from the start. Luo Ruoxin turned to Zhang Xian and asked, "Then, are you able to deduce the intention behind this pool of lava? That will likely be the key that leads us to the true entrance of the ancient domain." "I am still in the midst of figuring that out," Zhang Xian replied calmly as he secretly heaved a sigh of relief within. It was fortunate that he had reacted swiftly. Otherwise, if the other party were to learn of his thoughts, she might very well have strangled him to death on the spot. "Forget it, I should put those thoughts aside for the moment." Shaking his head, Zhang Xian tossed aside the miscellaneous thoughts in his mind and began assessing the situation before him. The lava beneath flurried furiously, reminiscent of boiling water. Even without approaching it, one could still vividly feel the intolerable heat that it emitted, seemingly attempting to roast one alive. Activating the Eye of Insight, Zhang Xian began studying the area carefully. Unfortunately, the vent of the volcano was filled with a thick layer of smoke puffing up, similar to that of a sauna room filled with steam, making it difficult for one to see through it. After scanning the area, Zhang Xian found no trace of any formation at all. In fact, even the flow of spiritual energy was indistinct to him here. Could the ancient domain be within a folded space? Frowning, Zhang Xian was just about to communicate with the myriad anthive queen to have the latter search the area when he suddenly heard a voice. "This doesn't seem to be ordinary lava." Turning his gaze toward the source of the voice, Zhang Xian saw Wu Shi and guild leader Han standing side by side. At this moment, the latter had an astonished look on his face, as if he had noticed something bewildering. The others in the area had also noticed the anomaly with guild leader Han, and they turned perplexed looks toward him as well. "Take a look." As he said those words, guild leader Han flicked his wrist, and a spirit intermediate tier weapon appeared in his grasp. With a swing of his arm, the weapon flew straight toward the lava. Putong. As soon as the weapon came into contact with the lava, a sizzling sound immediately echoed loudly in the air. Within just a few moments, it had already been reduced to liquid, disappearing completely from sight. The lava is able to melt even a spirit intermediate tier weapon? Everyone was petrified by what they had just seen. While they knew that venturing into the searing lava would be dangerous, they had thought that they would at least be able to last for a decent period of time without sustaining any damage with their Saint Realm cultivation. However, upon seeing this sight, they realized that they had been severely underestimating the dangers of the lava. The head of the Yunshu Master Teacher Academy, Wu Tianqiong, hesitated for a brief moment before exclaiming in astonishment, "That is Earth core lava." Earth core lava. The term was foreign to the crowd, so they directed questioning gazes toward Wu Tianqiong, gesturing for him to continue on. "I have read books on volcanoes in the past, and it is stated that the temperature of lava grows higher and higher the deeper one goes. Of them, the lava that boasts the greatest heat is the earth core lava. With just a single drip, it can melt spirit tier artifacts and even saint tier artifacts. While the one before us doesn't harness as much heat as that, it is clear that the heat it possesses is far beyond that of ordinary lava. Most likely, what lies on the other side of the lava pool isn't the ancient domain but an earth core." Wu Tianqiong analyzed. "This." The crowd frowned. "Regardless of whether that is true or not, we will know once we take a look." Wu Shi said. "You all wait here for a moment, I will head down to take a look." Given how hot the lava at the surface is, the heat you will have to face beneath is bound to be even more frightening. "Will you be fine?" Guild leader Han asked worriedly. "I ran a rough calculation earlier, and with my current cultivation, I should be able to venture around 100 meters in. Don't worry, I will rush out the moment I sense any danger." Wu Shi nodded grimly. "We will be stuck here if we don't try to do anything. At this rate, it is just a matter of time before we succumb as well. While they were flying above the vent, placing them some distance away from the lava, the heat that they had to endure was still considerable due to the seal above them locking the heat in. For the time being, they were still able to endure it through their jinqi, but it would only be a matter of time before they ran out of jinqi and succumbed to the heat. You're right. Be careful then. Knowing that Wu Shi was right, guild leader Han hesitated for a moment before nodding. I will be fine, Wu Shi replied with a smile. The next moment, his face suddenly turned grim as he drove the jinqi in his body furiously. An incredible aura burst forth, and it warped into the form of a majestic dragon. Then, his figure abruptly dashed downward, heading toward the lava. Voila! Parting the lava beneath him with forceful might, Wu Shi dived in. Ah! Zhang Xian hadn't expected Wu Shi to move so quickly. He had intended to persuade the latter against it, given the unknown dangers that could have been lurking beneath the lava, but he had been a little too slow. After a moment of hesitation, he decided to swallow his words. Perhaps, this might be for the best. He still hadn't made sense out of the situation yet, and perhaps Wu Shi might be able to uncover new clues for them. Gugugugu. It took only an instant for the lava to fill the opening that Wu Shi had made earlier. Nevertheless, the bubbles that surfaced continuously indicated that there was someone moving beneath the surface. Seeing the sight below, a combat master couldn't help but ask worriedly, will he be fine? On top of being a Saint 4 Dan expert, Wu Shi is also a capable master teacher who possesses many means. Even if he meets with danger, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to flee back up, guild leader Han replied after a moment of hesitation. To reassure the others, his words were confident. However, he was still unable to fully conceal the worry in his eyes. Clearly, even he had no way of saying for sure whether Wu Shi would be fine or not. Don't worry, Wu Shi might not be strongest cultivator of our Qingyuan Empire Master Teacher Pavilion, but he is definitely the one who wields the most life preservation means. This is also why our Master Teacher Pavilion decided to dispatch him for this expedition, Wu Shi said with a smile. Life preservation means? Everyone was bewildered. Indeed. Wu Shi cultivates a unique movement technique known as the star weaving steps. Through it, he can move at speeds comparable to even Saint 5 Dan leaving Aperture Realm experts. While it does deplete his jinqi swiftly, there is no doubt that it is an invaluable asset in times of danger. As searing as the lava beneath is, with Wu Shi's strength and means, escaping safely shouldn't be a problem for him. Besides, since the master of the ancient domain has left a life gate on the seal for us to enter, it doesn't make sense for him to try to kill us right afterwards. The eyes of the crowd lit up in realization, and they heaved a sigh of relief. Indeed. If even a 7-star pinnacle master teacher would be scorched to death right after entering the lava, wasn't this ancient domain a little too difficult? If that was the case, how could Yusu have gotten out alive? Besides, there was no reason for the elder who had created the ancient domain to design it in such a manner if he was just trying to kill them. Zhang Xian nodded in agreement. The other party's thoughts were similar to his. Since the master of the ancient domain had left a visible opening to the ancient domain, it was clear that they intended for others to enter it. The trials were dangerous and difficult to clear, but there would definitely be a solution. Who? Around 8 minutes later, just when everyone was starting to panic, a loud explosion sounded from the lava, and a figure darted back up. Wu Shi. The crowd hurriedly turned their gazes over, and upon seeing what was before them, their eyebrows leaped up in astonishment. Wu Shi was in a completely different state compared to before he entered the lava. The clothes on his body had disintegrated, leaving him stark naked. If not for the massive dragon he had formed using his jinqi that was concealing various parts of his body, he might have just died of embarrassment on the spot. However, his clothes being reduced to ash was just the least of the worries. More importantly, his face was completely pale, and he was panting heavily, as if he had just fled from something extremely fearsome. There were even some portions of his skin that were charred black, creating a particularly gruesome sight. Guild leader Han hurried forward and asked, "What happened?" On the other hand, Wu Shi swiftly swallowed a pill to recuperate his jinqi before putting on another set of clothes from his storage ring. "The temperature within the lava is higher than I thought," Wu Shi explained with a bitter smile. "I swiftly ventured downward as soon as I entered. I thought that with my stamina and jinqi, reaching the 100-meter mark wouldn't be an issue for me. However, the temperature increased faster than I thought it would. By the time I reached the 30-meter mark, I could already feel myself approaching my limit. The rate at which my jinqi was depleting from fending away the lava was already double the rate when I was at the surface. With great difficulty, I managed to reach the 40-meter mark. However, by then, my jinqi had already depleted by half. Knowing that it would be difficult for me to return if I were to venture any deeper, I decided to turn around at that point and rush back. Nevertheless, I still nearly depleted my jinqi and died inside. Even you were only able to reach the 40-meter mark?" Wu Tianxiong was astonished. Wu Shi's strength was the greatest of them all, and yet, he had only been able to venture 40 meters deep into the lava. Through this, it wasn't too difficult to imagine how fearsome the lava was. "Did you notice anything?" Guild leader Han probed. Wu Shi shook his head. "It is nothing but lava below. I wasn't able to see anything at all. Furthermore, there was a powerful pressure crushing down on me below, limiting my spiritual perception to only 10 meters. Anything more than that is beyond my means. I tried to peer downward when I was at the 40-meter mark, and based on what I saw, it seemed like there was still a very long distance before reaching the end of the lava." "Your spiritual perception can only extend to 10 meters. There is still a long distance before reaching the end?" The faces of the crowd warped in horror. Wu Shi was the one who possessed the strongest cultivation in the expedition team, and even guild leader Han wouldn't be a match for him. Yet, an expert of his caliber could only extend his spiritual perception 10 meters into the lava. Just how long would it take for them to scan the enormous volcano that had a diameter of 10 kilometers? Furthermore, if the entrance of the ancient domain was truly located within the lava, would they really be able to enter it? Indeed. When I was at the surface, my spiritual perception could still extend several hundred meters away. However, the deeper I went, the greater the constraint on my spiritual perception. Eventually, when I reached my limit, 40 meters deep, I could only extend it 10 meters. Wu Shi shook his head. "If you could only persist for 40 meters, and there was still a long distance to go before reaching the other side, how are we going to find the entrance to the ancient domain like that?" The crowd glanced at one another with helpless looks on their faces. After waiting for the opening of the seal for so long, were they going to be stuck right before the entrance, unable to do a thing at all? Just as everyone was overwhelmed with despair from being unable to venture any further, someone among the crowd suddenly shouted, "Shit, the opening to the seal has closed up, too." Everyone hurriedly turned around to take a look, only to see that the light barrier had reverted back to its initial white color. The 7-colored bridge from a moment ago had also vanished from sight, as if signifying the complete closure of the seal. One of the master teachers tried to pass through the light barrier as he had done before, but as if ramming into a wall of concrete steel, he was knocked back by a powerful might. This. The eyes of the master teacher narrowed in disbelief. How are we to leave now? He wasn't the only who reacted in such a manner. There were also several other master teachers who rushed up to the seal to try it too, and upon realizing that they were unable to pass through it as well, their faces paled in horror. Passing through the 7-colored light barrier from before had been extremely easy for them. It was just like diving into water, not impeding them at all. However, the current white, misty barrier before them was like a thick block of steel in their path. No matter how they rammed at it, it just wouldn't budge. In other words, they were completely trapped. If they couldn't find the way to advance into the ancient domain, they would be trapped there with the lava until the next opening of the seal, provided they could survive till then. No wonder you told us that we might face great peril in the expedition. The ancient domain is indeed fearsome, one of the master teachers muttered to himself. Before they joined the expedition, Wu Shi and the others had repeatedly warned them that great peril lay in the expedition of the ancient domain, and they could very well meet their death there. Back then, they had thought that it was just an exaggeration, and they had not thought much of it. In the end, before they had even entered the ancient domain, they had already found themselves helplessly lost. If that was the case, it was difficult to imagine the sheer extent of danger they would face in the ancient domain. Guild leader Han shook his head and said, "I said earlier that the seal would close within 15 minutes. It is impossible to open it once more. The only choice we have now is to trudge forward. It is pointless to dwell on this matter anymore." All of us joined this expedition knowing that we would face such dangerous situations. At this point, the only thing we can do is find the entrance to the ancient domain. The crowd nodded. Having been warned of the dangers of participating in the expedition, most of the expedition members had already prepared in case something unfortunate befell them in the midst of exploring the ancient domain. Since it was already impossible for them to back out at this point, they could only muster their courage and advance forward. Understanding the same logic, Zhang Xian turned his gaze back to the lava. At the same time, he forged a remote communication with the Myriad Anthive Queen. Before long, the Myriad Anthive Queen replied, "Master, there is no folded space in the area. Even if there is one, it is most likely beneath the lava, where I am unable to sense it." "There is no folded space in the area?" Zhang Xian's expression turned stern. Could it be that the entrance to the ancient domain really lay beneath the lava? But even Wu Shi was unable to venture too far down, let alone them. It was only the entrance of the ancient domain they were at, surely it wasn't designed to be so difficult. If that was truly the case, how did the old principal and his team manage to enter the ancient domain back then? It is a pity that I failed to obtain the map from the poison hall, or else we wouldn't be in such a helpless position now. Zhang Xian shook his head helplessly. If he had managed to obtain the map, he would have been able to find the route in easily. He wouldn't have been in such a difficult position at the moment. Forget it, there is no point brooding over it now. I should try to use the Library of Heaven's Path and see if I can find anything instead. Tossing away those negative thoughts in his mind, Zhang Xian descended toward the lava. As the lava was a non-living object, it couldn't possibly utilize battle techniques or that sort. Thus, the only way to make the Library of Heaven's Path compile a book on it was through touch. Seeing Zhang Xian flying toward the lava, Wu Shi couldn't help but exclaim in shock, "Senior uncle, what are you doing?" Knowing that he couldn't reveal the matter regarding the Library of Heaven's Path, Zhang Xian waved his hand and said, "I am just taking a closer look at the lava." A moment later, he was standing right above the lava. An intense wave of heat assaulted him, penetrating through his skin to sear even his bones, seemingly intent on reducing him to a crisp. Scorching. Zhang Xian's eyes narrowed in astonishment. It was no wonder Wu Shi was only able to venture 40 meters in. The temperature in the area was far more frightening than he could have imagined. Even if he were to exert his full strength, 30 meters would probably be his limit. Driving his Heaven's Path Shinchi, Zhang Xian expelled the heat out of his body before extending his hand toward the lava. "Flaws," Zhang Xian willed. "Who?" A book materialized in the Library of Heaven's Path. This lava is made out of rocks melted under the heat of the earth flames. It harnesses great heat within. It is made out of blue dark rock, granite, lapis, and many other minerals. Once solidified, it is an ideal material to construct a house. Upon reading the description in the book, Zhang Xian staggered and nearly fell to the ground. Construct a house. Construct your head. That is not what I want to know, alright? As stifled as Zhang Xian felt within, it was somewhat within his expectations. The Library of Heaven's Path could only analyze the very item that he was touching at that instant and reveal its details. This was similar to the many times he had attempted to collect multiple books into the Library of Heaven's Path simultaneously through touching the bookshelves, only to receive information on the material of the bookshelf instead. Similarly, Touching the lava only reflected the unique properties of the lava and not the flaws of the entire volcano. In other words, the seemingly omnipotent library of Heaven's Path was useless in this situation. What could he do? Rubbing his glabella in frustration, Zhang Xian had no choice but to return to the others. Seeing that even the miracle-producing Principal Zhang had been forced to retreat helplessly from the lava, disappointment surfaced in the eyes of Guild Leader Han. Sighing deeply, he instructed, "If it comes down to it, we will just have to allocate a region to each person and explore the lava pool bit by bit. Since the seal can be opened, I figure that the ancient domain shouldn't be located too deep into the lava. As long as we work together, we should be able to find some clues about the ancient domain's location. Explore the lava pool bit by bit." With grave expressions, the crowd nodded. This was the only measure they could take at the moment. Since there was no formation or anything hidden above the lava, there was a very good chance that the ancient domain was hidden beneath the lava. With no other alternatives at that moment, they could only comb the lava inch by inch, praying that they would find something soon. If the ancient domain is located beyond 40 meters beneath the surface of the lava, what should we do? The head of Luoqing Master Teacher Academy, Shen Pingchao, asked with a deep frown. Upon hearing those words, the crowd couldn't help nod in agreement as well. Since even Wu Shi was only able to reach 40 meters deep, there was no way they could go beyond that. It would be great if they could find the ancient domain within the top 40 meters of the lava, but if it was located beneath that point, there was no way they would be able to find it. At this point, Luo Ruoxin spoke up as well. Combing the area isn't a feasible solution. Guild Leader Han turned to Luo Ruoxin and asked, "Oh? Does Luo Shi have a suggestion to offer?" Just as the others have said, if the ancient domain is located more than 40 meters beneath the surface of the lava, there is no way we will be able to find it. Furthermore, considering the sheer scale of the lava vent and how there are only 30 of us here, how long do you think it will take us to finish combing the area? Luo Ruoxin said with a frown. This. Guild Leader Han was stumped. While most of the expedition members did possess spiritual perception, Wu Shi had said earlier that its range of effectiveness would gradually be compressed the further one delved into the lava. Furthermore, they would be unable to stay within the lava for extended periods of time. At this rate, they would probably run out of Jinqi and succumb to the heat before they were able to find the ancient domain. What should we do then? One of the master teachers asked. I am not too sure either. However, since the master of the ancient domain left a life gate in the seal for others to enter, there is bound to be a route that we can take, it is just that we haven't thought of it yet. As the saying goes, the sharpening of the axe is the key to woodcutting. Instead of fumbling around, it would be better for us to first identify our goal before making a move. That should heighten our chances of success, Luo Ruoxin said. The crowd nodded in agreement. She was right. Spreading their net thin in hopes of striking lucky was a luxury they couldn't afford. The circumstances they were in were simply too poor. Persisting for an hour, 2 hours, or 10 hours was still doable for them. However, beyond a day, the fire poison would probably start to set in. 2 days, and they would already be too feeble from the constant assault of the heat to search the area, and it wouldn't be too long before they were reduced to dried meat. Indeed. We have to first have a concrete idea in mind before carrying it out. Zhang Xian nodded as he turned his gaze back to the lava once more. The volcano vent was circular in shape, and at irregular intervals, a powerful spurt of lava would burst forth and strike the seal above them, creating a deafening explosion. It was fortunate that they had released the energies accumulated in the seal before, or else there was no doubt that the powerful spurt of lava would have induced a huge explosion within here. A thought suddenly surfaced in Zhang Xian's head. Could the key be related to the strength of these lava spurts? He was certain that the old principal and Yusu didn't have to go through so much effort to enter the ancient domain. Based on Yusu's testimony, the group back then had encountered an energy storm as soon as they stepped through the light barrier, and it was then that Yusu had been swept into an unknown area and met with the otherworldly demons. Energy storm. In other words, when they first entered, the seal was permeated with an overwhelmingly powerful force. Could the energy storm have been referring to the energies released during the opening of the seal? If that was the case, it would mean that, while his earlier release of the energies had made the insides of the seal significantly safer, it had also effectively terminated their route to the entrance of the ancient domain. Wait, if that is the case, does it mean that the area where the energies would have burst forth from during the opening of the seal is the area where the entrance of the ancient domain is located? If Yu Su wasn't lying, that could very well be the case. With such thoughts in mind, Zhang Xian hurriedly turned his gaze toward the lava to examine it closely. Coincidentally, a burst of energy surged forth from the lava at this moment. It came into contact with the area where his formation flag was planted previously, and it disappeared without a trace. The point where he had planted the flag was where the greatest opening of the seal was located, and it prevented any energies from building up within the seal. As a result, the lava was relatively calmer, such that he had even forgotten about this matter himself. I should give it a try. Zhang Xian nodded in resolution. Regardless of whether his conclusion was correct or not, the only way he could know for sure was to test it out personally. And honestly speaking, he couldn't think of anything else other than that. The Library of Heaven's path doesn't work on the lava, so the only way I can really check on it is to venture in. Wu Shi is still in the midst of recuperating from his previous exertion, so I can only do it personally. Zhang Xian flicked his wrist, and a huge cauldron appeared before him. The Golden Origin Cauldron. With the previous breakthrough, that fellow had already become a Saint Intermediate tier artifact, granting its strength on par with Saint 4 Dan Pinnacle experts. While its fighting prowess might pale in comparison to veteran experts like Wu Shi, in terms of resistance to heat, the latter definitely came nowhere close to matching it. The abrupt action from Zhang Xian drew gazes from the crowd to him. Upon taking a look, they couldn't help but freeze in astonishment. The Golden Origin Cauldron has become a Saint Intermediate tier artifact. Most of them were aware of the existence of the famed Guardian Saint artifact of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, but according to what they knew, it should only have been a Saint Low tier artifact. When did it advance to Intermediate tier? There might only be a minor tier difference between low tier and intermediate tier, but the power disparity between the two was immense, as if the gap between heaven and earth. A blacksmith student whom Master took in on a whim yesterday night helped reforge my magnificent body, and in the midst of doing so, I advanced to intermediate tier. What? Are you all envious? Seeing the shocked gazes directed toward it, the Golden Origin Cauldron burst into hearty laughter, and with blatant glee in its voice, it continued boasting. There is really no need for you all to envy me. It is only due to my outstanding talent that I am able to achieve breakthroughs so easily. The likes of you can't possibly hope to emulate my greatness. The saying means that it is important to prepare ahead of the action. Even the sharpening of the axe is a crucial part of woodcutting itself. Chapter 1031, Entering the Lava, Shut Up. Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. Roger that. Hearing the bellow from its master, the Golden Origin Cauldron immediately fell silent, not daring to say another word. Even though it had halted its words halfway through, the content that it had revealed thus far was more than enough for the others to make sense of the situation. Their gazes couldn't help but drift to Zhang Xian. Took in an apprentice as his blacksmith student on a whim? Reforged the Golden Origin Cauldron? Principal Zhang, what is going on? As a Saint Low-tier artifact, it would at least take the strength of a 7-star blacksmith to reforge it and raise its grade. Yet, an apprentice that he had taken in as his blacksmith student on a whim had actually reforged it? What was going on? A blacksmith apprentice was someone who hadn't even passed the 1-star blacksmith examination yet, right? How could such a person help to reforge a Saint Low-tier artifact? Last night, I met an apprentice who was trying to end his life. Noting everyone's gaze on him, Zhang Xian began explaining the matter that had happened the previous night. It was no secret anyway, so there was no need for him to hide it. An apprentice who couldn't even smith a mortal-tier weapon was actually able to upgrade the Golden Origin Cauldron with just an hour of guidance from you? This. Surely that is impossible. Hearing the story, the crowd felt incredibly frenzied. To actually guide an apprentice in reforging his Saint Lotier artifact. Just how confident did one have to be to dare do such a thing? Just how deep of an understanding of smithing did one have to command to be capable of pulling off such a feat? I have long heard that Principal Zhang possesses incredible smithing mastery, but it seems like I have still been underestimating him. Indeed. Just by this feat alone, it can be seen that his grasp over smithing is on par with 7-star pinnacle blacksmiths. How can we ever expect to match up with that? The principals of the other 3 master-teacher academies couldn't help but sigh bitterly at this point. They had learned from Zhao Bingshu's words that the young man before them possessed an astounding mastery of smithing. All along, they had thought that 6-star pinnacle would be the cap, especially considering the other party's young age. However, upon hearing this, they realized that they had been taking Zhang Xian too lightly. One must know that even a real 7-star pinnacle blacksmith couldn't possibly guide an apprentice into successfully reforging a Saint Lotier artifact. Different from what the others were focused on, Luo Ruoxin looked at the young man before her with widened eyes and asked, "You? After parting from me, you saved a person and tore away the hypocritical mask of an elder of the blacksmith guild?" Zhang Xian nodded. I was intending to follow you after you left, but it was then that I saw someone attempting to end his life. It was due to this incident that I eventually came late. I see. Luo Ruoxin shook her head helplessly. She had thought that the other party was pig-headed when he didn't pursue her the previous night, and she had even flown into a rage over it. However, it seemed like she had misunderstood the other party. As a master teacher, protecting the sanctity and dignity of teaching was clearly more important than one's own personal matters. Nevertheless, despite knowing that he had been misunderstood, he didn't use this matter as an excuse to justify himself. Had it not been for the Golden Origin Cauldron bragging about the matter, she would probably have remained ignorant of it. His character was truly worthy of respect. Not dwelling on the matter, Zhang Xian turned to the crowd and explained, "I am guessing that the ancient domain might be located at the crux of where the energy is being released from in the lava. Thus, I intend to head in to take a look." The crux of where the energy is being released from? The crowd frowned. Considering the rampaging energies that are bound to be at the crux, even if there is a formation or folded space there, it would have been destroyed long ago. How could the ancient domain possibly be constructed there? Guild leader Han remarked. He had taken that point into his analysis as well, and it was also the first possibility that he had eliminated. The energies that had accumulated in the lava were so great that should an explosion occur, everything within a radius of 1,000 kilometers would be reduced to ashes. Under the constant assault of such a powerful force, even the stablest of folded spaces or formations would have been destroyed long ago. I can't deny that, but the very energy that could be used to destroy the formation could also be used to sustain it. There are strengths and weaknesses to it, and with our limited understanding of formations, there is no way we can make a conclusive judgment on the matter. The only way to find out is to head down ourselves, Zhang Xian replied with a wave of his hand. Guild leader Han's mouth opened to refute Zhang Xian's words, but to his surprise, he found that the other party's words were logical as well. As the saying goes, water can float a boat or sink it. A powerful might could destroy the formation, but if a formation master could tap into it well, it could also become a powerful source of energy that further reinforced the might of the formation. Of course, that would be a matter for higher-ranked formation masters to frustrate over. With their current level of proficiency, it was still too far away for them. "Alright, I will be going in to take a look." After explaining the matter, Zhang Xian beckoned the Golden Origin Cauldron over and leaped into its body. With the massive size of the Golden Origin Cauldron, it could easily house 3 to 4 people in it without trouble. Thus, Zhang Xian could hide within it while exploring the depths of the lava. Zhang Xian did consider sending the Golden Origin Cauldron alone. That would have been much safer for him, but considering the unreliable nature of the cauldron, it was questionable whether it would be able to provide him with any useful information or not. Thus, he decided to make the trip down personally. Seeing Zhang Xian leap into the cauldron, Luo Ruoxin couldn't help but exclaim worriedly, "Be careful." Zhang Xian flashed Luo Ruoxin a smile before fully entering the Golden Origin Cauldron. "Here I go." With an excited exclamation, the Golden Origin Cauldron began charging toward the area where the energies in the lava were originating from. The previous blast of energy had just occurred a moment ago, and judging from the past occurrences, there would be a 10 minutes interval before the next one. He could make use of this interval to dive in. Otherwise, if they were caught in the explosion, it was questionable if the Golden Origin Cauldron would be able to take the impact. Gugugugu. As soon as the massive cauldron descended into the lava, bubbles began popping up at the surface. Seated within the cauldron, Zhang Xian felt heat assaulting him from all directions. The Golden Origin Cauldron was a weapon cauldron, specially forged to retain heat so that it could melt even the most durable of metals. Given so, it was inevitable that heat would seep into the cauldron from the surroundings. While Zhang Xian wouldn't come into direct contact with the lava by hiding within the Golden Origin Cauldron, given the sealed environment that he was in, the heat he would have to endure was nowhere beneath the heat outside. Zhang Xian began driving his Heaven's Path Shinqi, and the heat assaulting him alleviated significantly. A moment later, he stood up and said, "Ding ding, stop." Here. The Golden Origin Cauldron was taken aback. They had barely entered the lava, not having even ventured 10 meters deep. To stop at this point, why? Zhang Xian nodded. "There is no need to go too deep. Wait here for me." After saying those words, Zhang Xian drew out his soul from his glabella and slipped into the lava. While the Golden Origin Cauldron had raised its cultivation significantly, its limit was unlikely to be much more than 40 meters. Furthermore, it was also doubtful if he would be able to tolerate the heat while hiding within the Golden Origin Cauldron if they were to venture too deep. In truth, the reason he had gotten the Golden Origin Cauldron to enter the lava with him was to protect his physical body. His true goal was to venture in the lava with his soul. Due to the intangible nature of souls, while his soul would still be affected by the immense heat of the lava, the extent to which he was affected was significantly lower as compared to that of his physical body. Furthermore, he could also move freely around the area without being affected by the crushing pressure of the lava, allowing him to dive deeper and possibly uncover more secrets. Indeed, it is as I expected. By entering the lava, not only is my soul undamaged by the heat, I can even absorb the surrounding energy to strengthen it. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. As his soul was cultivated through the Heaven's Path soul art, he didn't suffer from searing yang decline like other souls would, making him near impervious to heat. Had it been any other soul oracle, putting aside entering the lava, their soul would have already dissipated into nothingness just from the heat inside the cauldron. This heat is ideal for refining weapons and ridding the impurities within. Could it be used to temper my soul too? While a soul was intangible, just like primordial spirits, they were very much existent in this world. Since this heat could refine weapons, perhaps it could refine a soul as well. I should give it a try. Thus, leaving his soul floating freely in the lava, he began absorbing the heat from the surroundings slowly. Tzzzzzzzzzz. A searing surge of energy began gushing into Zhang Xian's soul. Under the tempering of the intense heat, his soul began to growing stronger and stronger. Just like he had imagined, the impurities contained within his soul was also being expelled continuously. As I expected, it works. He had been thinking that his soul was a little too bloated all along, making it a little troublesome for him to squeeze into his body. He had been wanting to refine it for a while now, but he hadn't been able to find a way to do so. The immense heat within the lava happened to be an ideal opportunity for him to do so. However, this isn't the time for me to cultivate yet. While my soul might be unaffected by the burst of energies that occur once every 10 minutes, the same cannot be said about the Golden Origin Cauldron. There is a chance that it could be blasted away by the sheer might of it, and that will pose significant trouble to me. Even though Zhang Xian wanted to cultivate and temper his soul, he knew that this wasn't the right time for him to do so. Thus, he stopped what he was doing and began diving further into the lava. The most important thing for him to do at the moment was find the entrance to the ancient domain. As for cultivation, he would have plenty of opportunities to do so later on. Just as Wu Shi had said, the temperature grew higher and higher the further he ventured downward. Every 10 meters he descended, the heat in the surroundings intensified significantly. According to my calculations, the limit for Saint 1 Dan cultivators is 10 meters, the limit for Saint 2 Dan cultivators is 20 meters, so on and so forth. As a Saint 4 Dan expert, the limit for Wu Shi is 40 meters. Anything further is beyond his scope of abilities. Zhang Xian's soul ventured downward swiftly. In just a few breaths, he had already reached the 40-meter mark. Upon sensing the change in the temperature at this boundary, he came up with a deduction. The 40-meter mark sure is warm. Even in my soul state, it is still a little hard to bear. The previous 30 meters had not posed much of a threat to his soul, but as soon as he reached the 40-meter mark, the heat around him suddenly intensified greatly. The relentless assault of blazing heat was difficult for even his soul to withstand. Continue on. Driving his heaven's path soul art to alleviate the heat, Zhang Xian broke the 40-meter mark and continued diving deeper. As soon as he treaded beyond the 40-meter mark, he suddenly felt as if he had been thrown into a pot of oil. Despite the superior durability of his soul, it still began distorting out of shape under the assault of the overwhelming heat, seemingly ready to dissipate very soon. Zhang Xian's face darkened. This isn't working. This is a region that only leaving Aperture Realm experts are able to enter. Even in my soul form, I am already at my limit. He had been thinking of venturing deeper in the lava by utilizing the inherent advantage of his soul's resistance to heat. However, from the looks of it, it seemed like he had underestimated how hot the lava was. Considering how even a Saint 4 Dan Primordial Spirit Realm Master Teacher had nearly succumbed at the 40-meter mark, it was already rather incredible that his transcendent mortal 9 Dan soul could come this far as well. Enduring the pain, Zhang Xian tried to trudge on forcefully, but upon crossing the 50-meter mark, he felt that his soul was starting to dissipate. He was at his limit. An increase in temperature signified an increase in the activity of a material at its fundamental level, thus making its existing structure unstable. This was similar to how solid weapons melted into metallic fluids under intense heat. Souls couldn't exactly be considered a material, but when the temperature grew too high, even space itself would become unstable, let alone a mere soul. Alarmed, Zhang Xian hurriedly retreated back to the 50-meter mark, and only then did he finally feel the dissipation of his soul stopping. At this point, he couldn't help but frown in distress. I have already reached the 50-meter mark, but the ancient domain is still nowhere to be seen. Could it be that my deduction is wrong and it is not located here? He had come this far, but there was nothing to be seen. The only thing that was notable was the progressively increasing temperature. Just as Wu Tianqiong had said earlier, he was probably coming close to the earth core lava. At a place as warm as that, even formation flags would melt and folded spaces would collapse. Could he really have been wrong? While Zhang Xian was in the midst of contemplating, a rumbling suddenly echoed from beneath like a huge machine coming into life. With narrowed eyes, Zhang Xian saw an immense energy blasting straight in his direction. Sugar. Why did the energies burst prematurely this time around? This is bad, really bad. Chapter 1032, Great Heaven Reversal Formation. That force was powerful and ferocious. Reminiscent of a rampaging tsunami, before Zhang Xian could do anything, it was already right before him. He hurriedly turned around to flee, but right when he was about to do so, the ferocious energy tore a line right through the lava, and at the very end, rows after rows of buildings came into sight. In that moment, Zhang Xian felt as if he was seeing a mirage. It is indeed below the lava. Barely after this thought surfaced in Zhang Xian's mind, he felt an overwhelming force crushing down on him. Unable to withstand it, he ended up tumbling his way up. Hong Long. Following which, he saw the golden origin cauldron, swept by the immense force, blasting forcefully out of the lava, striking heavily onto the seal. A resounding chime reverberated in the air. It was fortunate that the fellow had advanced to Saint Intermediate tier earlier, and he had released the accumulated energies beforehand. Otherwise, this single strike could have killed both the golden origin cauldron and his body within. Principal Zhang. Zhang Shi. Senior Uncle. Seeing the golden origin cauldron being knocked out by the violent spurt of lava, the crowd that had been waiting outside for Zhang Xian leaped in shock. They hurriedly rushed toward the golden origin cauldron to check on their condition. This is bad. Zhang Xian's eyes narrowed in alarm. Only his physical body was in the cauldron at the moment. If he attempted to return under such conditions, the master teachers, with their superior eyes of discernment, would surely notice that he was a soul oracle. Once that happened, he would be in deep trouble. If it was discovered that the esteemed principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy practiced the arts of the heinous soul oracles, how would others view him? But if his soul didn't return to his body would remain cold and lifeless, no different from a corpse. If those fellows thought that he had died and attempt to cremate him, it would be too late for tears then. To make matters worse, his body possessed the ability of mind of void. It would react instinctively before danger, so if any of them tried to cremate him, his body would immediately move to stop them. If his body were to end up killing a couple of them in that state. Zhang Xian's head was already hurting just from thinking of it. Anxious, he was considering if he should just try his luck and charge out of the lava. Perhaps, he might be able to return to his body before anyone noticed him. However, in the end, he changed his mind and sent a telepathic message to the Golden Origin Cauldron instead. Wu Shi and guild leader Han were Saint 4 Dan primordial spirit realm experts. With a sweep of their spiritual perception, they would immediately notice the peculiar nature of his soul. Given so, the best and safest solution at hand was to have the Golden Origin Cauldron return to the lava. Ding ding, come back. No way. It's too dangerous down there. The Golden Origin Cauldron shivered in fear. You must be joking. Just staying down there for a few minutes nearly made my magnificent body shatter into bits. There is no way I am going to be so foolish as to go down once more to commit suicide. On the other hand, seeing how a weapon cauldron was actually so fearful of death, Zhang Xian felt so enraged that his lungs could burst from sheer fury. What the heck is this? There are so many humans here who don't fear death, and yet, a saint artifact like you ended up being the one who treats your life most precious. Zhang Xian was rendered speechless. As long as you come here, I will find a way to raise your cultivation to leaving Aperture Realm. Left with no choice, Zhang Xian could only attempt to lure it in with benefits. While the Golden Origin Cauldron was fearful of death, it did have unquestionable loyalty to him. At times like this, if he could blind its fear with greed, it would be willing to do as he said. Leaving Aperture Realm? Really? The Golden Origin Cauldron leaped up in excitement. There was a significant difference between the leaving Aperture Realm of Saint-tier artifacts and that of humans. While humans gain the ability to draw out their primordial spirit and exert overwhelming might, Saint-tier artifacts would have their spirits refined to a level comparable to primordial spirits. While its spirit would still be unable to leave its body and travel freely, it would gain the ability to control its form and sprout arms and legs. Well, the sight of it was indeed rather bizarre and hideous, but nevertheless, it was a huge evolution for Saint-tier artifacts, a step toward them becoming independent beings. Don't worry, I always mean what I say. Zhang Xian said. Raising the cultivation of a Saint-tier artifact wasn't easy, but it wasn't entirely impossible. He still had the black gold crystal ore that he had obtained from the treasure left behind by Wu Yangzi. As long as he could fuse it into the Golden Origin Cauldron's body, he should be able to raise its cultivation further. However, there were great difficulties in doing so as well. He would have to melt the black gold crystal ore entirely in order to fuse it perfectly with the golden origin cauldron, but ordinary earth flames weren't capable of doing so. It was unknown if even the lava deeper beneath would be sufficient to do the job. All right then. Receiving Zhang Xian's word, the golden origin cauldron dived back into the lava with a piercing shrill before the other master teachers could surround it. Seeing how the golden origin cauldron was moving around boisterously, charging back into the lava right after being blasted out of it a moment ago, they couldn't help but fall into a daze. Putong. After the golden origin cauldron entered the lava, Zhang Xian hurriedly slipped back into his body before flying out of the cauldron to appear before everyone else. Zhang Shi, are you fine? The crowd asked worriedly. I'm all right. Zhang Xian shook his head. When venturing below earlier, I saw quite a few buildings below. If I am not mistaken, the ancient domain is really right beneath there. How deep is it? Wu Shi asked. After a moment of thought, Zhang Xian replied, I am not too sure, but I estimate it to be around 100 meters deep. Even though he had only caught a glimpse of it, it wasn't too difficult for him to estimate a distance with his sharp eye of discernment. 100 meters? The faces of the crowd warped in horror. Wu Shi had nearly died from trying to dive 40 meters deep. 100 meters was clearly an impossible mission for them. If that was where the ancient domain truly was, then it made no difference to them at all, since there was no way they were going to be able to access it. Do you have any idea how we can reach it? Wu Shi asked guild leader Han, only to see the latter shaking his head with a bitter smile. Even he had no way of venturing 100 meters deep into the ancient domain. At this moment, Zhang Xian spoke hesitantly. I do have an idea in mind. Oh. Many pairs of eyes immediately gathered on him. That lava spurt earlier is extremely powerful. At its full force, it is capable of parting the lava, creating a temporary passageway that we can pass through. That was also how I managed to see the buildings below as well. We could make use of this passageway to slip into the ancient domain. Zhang Xian said. The passageway only opened up for a brief moment, but as long as they made ample preparations beforehand and charged in swiftly, it was entirely possible for them to pass through it. It is not a bad idea, but I fear that it might be unfeasible. Indeed. Just think of how powerful the lava spurt was, even the golden origin cauldron was knocked out of it. To attempt to travel against that overwhelming force, that is an impossible feat. Guild leader Han and Wu Shi glanced at one another and shook their heads. The idea was not bad, possibly the best one they had so far, but it was a pity that it couldn't possibly be executed. In the face of the powerful surge of energies from beneath, they would already be considered lucky if they weren't torn to shreds from facing it head-on. To attempt to travel a distance of 100 meters against it, that was clearly an impossible feat. Taking a step back, even if it was possible, it was likely to take up considerable time. If the lava were to cave in on them while they were in the midst of traveling downwards, they would, without the slightest doubt, die there and then. You are right in saying that traveling against that burst of energies is nearly impossible. However, what if we were to follow the burst of energies instead? Zhang Xian asked. Follow the burst of energies? The crowd couldn't comprehend what Zhang Xian was driving at. That burst of energies originated from the depths of the lava, and it was headed up toward the seal. How were they supposed to follow the burst of energies down when they were traveling in the opposite direction? Abruptly coming to a realization, guild leader Han asked, does Principal Zhang mean to gather the energy from the burst of energies through a unique formation and rebound it downward? Indeed. Zhang Xian nodded. Guild leader Han frowned. But that poses its dangers as well. Given how powerful that burst of energies is, if we fail to gather it well, it could very well result in a devastating explosion. Gather the energy from the burst of powers through a unique formation. Rebound it downward. Hearing the conversation between the two, the crowd finally understood what was going on, and grim expressions surfaced on their faces. They had witnessed the might of the burst of energies from the lava with their own eyes. It was overwhelmingly powerful. To gather it together and redirect it downward into the lava, it would be fine if they succeeded, but if they failed, considering the volatility of the energies contained within the burst, it could very well lead to a devastating explosion that would kill them on the spot. Do you have any other ideas then? Zhang Xian asked. Guild leader Han froze. Considering that the lava was at least 100 meters deep, there was indeed no easy way they could bypass it. The idea proposed by Principal Zhang could very well be the best one they had. The seal has already closed, so we can't back out anymore. If we fail to enter the ancient domain, death is the only possible outcome. Since we are already cornered as it is, why don't we take a gamble? Zhang Xian said. The crowd nodded in agreement. There were no other alternatives, they could only give it a try. They wouldn't last long if they didn't do anything. What do we do then? Having joined the expedition knowing that they might very well face death, it didn't take long for the group to make up their minds after some discussion. They hurriedly turned their gazes toward Zhang Xian for instructions. Simple. Firstly, I need all of the grade 7 formation flags that you have. After that, pay close attention to my commands and move when I tell you to. We will be entering the Golden Origin Cauldron and charging through the lava pool in it, Zhang Xian said. As a saint-tier artifact, the Golden Origin Cauldron was capable of expanding its size to a certain limit. At its largest, it could easily house 30 men without its insides getting too cramped. Considering how there was a significant disparity in the flying speed of the expedition members, it would be best for all of them to advance together within the Golden Origin Cauldron instead. Firstly, it would be safer. Secondly, they would be able to travel faster this way as well. All right. Hearing the arrangements, everyone nodded in agreement. There were quite a few grade 7 formation flags among the expedition members, especially with guild leader Han. All in all, Zhang Xian gathered roughly 500 formation flags, and he couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. It would probably be enough with so many of them. The most important matter at hand was to find out how he could set up a formation that was capable of gathering and harnessing rampaging energies within it. Considering the strength of the rampaging energies, the grade of the formation could not be too low. To be safe, the minimum requirement for it was grade 7 pinnacle. Guild leader Han, you are the head of the Qingyuan conferred Empire Formation Master Guild. Do you happen to have any formation books and blueprints on you? Zhang Xian asked. Formation books and blueprints? I do have quite a few of them. Guild leader Han couldn't help but be taken aback by Zhang Xian's request. They were already going to set up the formation, so why was the other party suddenly asking him for books at this moment? I need to borrow them for a moment. Then, Zhang Xian turned to the crowd and said, if anyone else has any books regarding formation, pass them over to me as well. The formation that I am going to set up later will determine our life and death, so I dare not take it lightly. Thus, I hope to do some last-minute reading in hopes of heightening the chances of success. All right. Knowing the importance of the matter, the other master teachers hurriedly took out all of the books regarding formations that they had on them and passed them over. As expected of the head of a formation master guild, Han Su did have a lot of books on him. Just the number of 7-star formation master books that he alone possessed was more than several thousand. Paired with those from the others, there were around 10,000 of them in total. Zhang Xian swiftly scanned through the books with his eyes, collecting them into the Library of Heaven's Path and compiling them to form a Heaven's Path formation art. While his consciousness was immersed within the Library of Heaven's Path, trying to take in the vast knowledge contained in the 7-star Heaven's Path formation art, his body was flipping through those books one after another, acting as if he was studying them carefully. 2 hours later, he had finally succeeded in internalizing the 7-star Heaven's Path formation art. All right, I am done studying. You can take back your books now. Zhang Xian said. After which, he closed his eyes and began making calculations. Very soon, a formation surfaced in his mind. Having studied the 7-star heavens path formation art, it went without saying that his comprehension of formations had reached the level of 7-star pinnacle, perhaps even being on par with some 8-star primary stage formation masters. With his current proficiency in formations, it wasn't too difficult for him to identify a fitting formation for the geographical terrain he was in. The best formation to use in this situation is the Grade 7 Pinnacle Great Heaven Reversal Formation. However, Zhang Xian frowned. The formation is highly demanding on one's soul. I am unable to set it up with my current strength. Based on his calculations, the current problem that they were facing could be perfectly resolved by setting up a Great Heaven Reversal Formation. However, there was an issue with that. Due to the complexity of the formation, the soul of the formation master had to have reached a certain level before they could set it up. However, his soul cultivation was only at Transcendent Mortal 9 Dan at the moment, a long way off from being able to set up the formation. I won't be able to set up the formation unless I can advance my soul cultivation further. Chapter 1033, The Appearance of the Ancient Domain. His soul cultivation was only at Transcendent Mortal 9 Dan at the moment. Being a soul oracle, his soul was indeed significantly stronger than most Saint Realm cultivators, but it was still far too weak from being able to set up the Great Heaven Reversal Formation. As a Grade 7 Pinnacle Formation, it was designed with the capabilities of a Saint 4 Dan Primordial Spirit Realm expert in mind. While Zhang Xian's soul possessed similar capabilities with a primordial spirit, it was a pity that his soul was still too weak at the moment. Unless he could raise the cultivation of his soul. Of course, there was guild leader Han around, and there was no doubt that he did possess a sufficiently strong soul to set up the Great Heaven Reversal Formation. However, the situation was a little different here. The formation flags had to be planted near the lava, but this meant that the formation flags would be at risk of melting. As such, the formation had to be set up swiftly just a few moments before the burst of energies. On top of that, the activation of the formation also had to be spot on, with only just a single second of error allowed. These two feats were something that guild leader Han was incapable of. Furthermore, Zhang Xian would only have perfect control over the formation if he were to set it up himself. If the slightest error occurred, the burst of energies could end up missing the ancient domain, thus causing his efforts to end in vain. Perhaps, they might even lose their lives due to it. Zhang Xian looked at the crowd and said, I have already thought of how it could be set up, but I need to make some preparations. I will be entering the lava with Ding Ding to calculate the positioning of the flags. I might end up staying down there for quite some time, but I won't be in any danger, so there's no need to worry. He was intending to enter the lava to cultivate his soul, so it was likely that it would take a fair bit of time. Thus, there was a need for him to inform them in advance lest they dive down to look for him out of worry. That could end up being troublesome for him. The crowd nodded. After some discussion, Zhang Xian's body entered the golden origin cauldron once more, and the latter plopped forcefully into the lava. The area that was chosen this time around was some distance away from the area where the burst of energies was triggered, so they wouldn't be in any danger. Just like the before, the golden origin cauldron stopped at around the 10-meter mark to hide from the spiritual perception of others. Right after all preparations were done, he was just about to draw out his soul when a thought flashed across his mind. Who? An identical figure appeared in the cauldron. His clone. This place had the unique ability of refining one's soul, so it was a good opportunity to his clone to raise his strength as well. After communicating for a bit, the clone also learned about the current situation, and his eyes lit up in excitement. Voila! His clone drew out his soul as well and said, I will be going down to take a look. After saying those words, he dived down into the lava right away. Seeing how swiftly that fellow ran away, Zhang Xian shook his head helplessly. He quickly dived down into the lava with his soul as well. With his previous experience, he headed all the way down. 20 meters, 30 meters, 40 meters. In the blink of an eye, he reached the 50-meter mark. The higher the temperature, the greater the refining effect on one's soul. While the heat was rather unbearable for his soul at the 50-meter mark, it allowed his soul to grow at the fastest rate possible as well. Where's my clone? Coming to a halt, Zhang Xian was just about to begin cultivating when he suddenly realized that the fellow who had left ahead of him was nowhere to be seen. He quickly took a look around him, and only then did he realize that the other party had dived right down to the 60-meter mark and was currently cultivating with his eyes tightly shut. The searing heat in the surroundings flowed into the other party's soul, refining it further, resulting in his aura growing stronger and stronger. He was actually able to reach the 60-meter mark. Zhang Xian's eyes widened in astonishment. The soul of his clone had come from the same source as him. Despite using his full strength, he was only barely able to reach the 50-meter marks. On the other hand, his clone was actually able to reach 60 meters. Treating Wei Ruyan has depleted a fair portion of my soul essence, and the deposition of a fragment of my soul into the mausoleum tablet resulted in significant depletion as well. That fellow has been a little stronger than me from the start, and those incidents have only served to widen the gap between us. Soon, Zhang Xian managed to make sense out of the situation, and he couldn't help but sigh gloomily. While he had recovered from those depletions eventually, his soul didn't manage to return to the wholesome state it had been before. It was due to this that his clone's soul was able to progress way further than him. Staring at his clone, Zhang Xian suddenly felt a heavy pressure on his shoulders. No, this won't do. I have to hurry up and cultivate. Otherwise, how embarrassing it will be if I can't even match up to my clone. While the others were busy dominating their clones, he was being dominated by his clone. This was unacceptable. Closing his eyes, Zhang Xian focused his attention on driving his Heaven's Path soul art, and the heat from the surroundings began to flow into his body. The searing heat gradually tempered his slowly dissipating soul, making it more condensed and powerful. Gu. Previously, in the subterranean gallery, Zhang Xian had already gathered the soul cultivation techniques of many otherworldly demons to compile the transcendent mortal 9-Dan Heaven's Path soul art, allowing his soul energy to reach 34 million ding. Under the refinement of the intense heat, his soul, which was larger than 10 meters, was gradually being compressed, but the might it wielded was rising swiftly. 35 million ding. 36 million ding. 37 million ding. As time passed, the rate at which his strength rose increased faster and faster, and his aura was growing more powerful and heavier as well. Kacha. After some period of time, his soul finally broke through its limit and advanced from transcendent mortal 9-Dan to half-saint. I made a breakthrough. Zhang Xian was astonished. As he hadn't compiled the half-saint Heaven's Path soul art yet, he had thought that it should be impossible for him to achieve a breakthrough. Yet, who would have thought that he would be able to do it through the sheer heat of the lava? It seemed like gauging the strength of a soul by its size wasn't the way to go. What was more important was to refine it. The higher the purity of one's soul, the more nimble and powerful it would be. In a sense, this was similar to Jinqi as well. After achieving a breakthrough, Zhang Xian felt refreshed. Lowering his head to take a look, he noticed that his clone had already achieved a breakthrough. Furthermore, from the looks of it, it seemed like the other party had even reached half-saint intermediate stage. Humph! Gritting his teeth, Zhang Xian began flying over to the 60-meter mark. Previously, when he attempted to head toward the 60-meter mark, he had felt a powerful strain on his soul, as if it would be torn apart at any moment. However, with the refinement of his soul had become far more durable than before, allowing it to withstand the intense heat easily. Continue. Knowing that the only way he could catch up with his clone was to be strict with himself, Zhang Xian didn't stop at just the 60-meter mark. Instead, he proceeded on to the 70-meter mark. Upon reaching the 70-meter mark, he felt his soul quivering once more as a powerful force threatened to rip his soul apart. Not daring to advance any further, Zhang Xian sat down and continued refining his soul. With the enhanced rate of refinement due to the stronger heat from the surroundings, Zhang Xian was growing stronger at a rapid rate. At the same time, his soul managed to compress down to 10 meters. If I can compress my soul below 10 meters, my strength will surely be enhanced significantly. The 10-meter mark was a significant demarcation point for a soul. Back then, he had accidentally crushed the Huanyu Empire's cleansing lake in an attempt to break through that bottleneck. If he could use the heat to compress his soul below 10 meters at this point, not only would it become easier for him to slip back into his body, his strength would also be boosted significantly. As the searing heat circulated through his soul to refine it, Zhang Xian felt as if someone had placed him amid the inferno of hell. The excruciating pain that he was suffering at the moment was so unbearable that he felt as if he could pass out at any moment. However, clenching his jaws, he forced himself to hold on. Some time later, a loud buzz sounded from his soul. His soul had been compressed back below 10 meters, and his cultivation had also reached half-saint intermediate stage. I succeeded. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. He instinctively turned his gaze upward to take a look, but he realized that his clone wasn't there. Thus, he turned his gaze downward, and he realized that the other party, at some point, had overtaken him and arrived at the 80-meter mark. The other party's eyes were closed, deep in cultivation. The size of his soul was only at 9 meters, an indication that he had reached half-saint advanced stage. That fellow. Not expect his clone to be even faster than him, Zhang Xian couldn't help but feel a little anxious. He hurriedly dived further down as well. Having compressed his soul back within the 10-meter mark, he was able to pass through the 80-meter mark without any trouble. Advancing ahead, Zhang Xian went straight to the 90-meter mark before he stopped to cultivate. This time, the rate at which his soul was being refined was extremely fast. Within just 10 minutes, his soul had already been compressed down to 9 meters as well. Knowing that his clone was bound to be faster than him, Zhang Xian didn't bother sneaking the other party a glance anymore. Instead, he chose to focus all of his attention on his cultivation and continued on. 20 minutes later, his soul reached 8 meters, and his soul cultivation also reached half-saint pinnacle, ready to achieve a breakthrough at any moment. At his current level, the heat at the 90-meter mark was no longer sufficient for him. Thus, he dived further down, and as he had expected, his clone was already at the 100-meter mark. At this moment, the other party's cultivation was also at the same level as his, half-saint pinnacle. However, instead of cultivating, the other party was gazing downward, seemingly assessing something. Perplexed, Zhang Xian headed up to his clone's side and looked down as well. What he saw left him slightly stunned. There was no lava beneath the 100-meter mark. Instead, there was a massive barrier with innumerable buildings constructed within it, similar to what Zhang Xian had seen earlier. Is this the ancient domain? It is indeed below the lava. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in excitement. He had only gotten a glimpse of it earlier, so he had not been able to confirm whether what he had seen was only a mirage or not. However, with this, the doubts that he had been harboring before had finally been entirely dispelled. The ancient domain they were looking for was indeed at the bottom of the lava. But, given how deeply hidden this place was, how in the world did the old principal and the others manage to get in back then? Zhang Xian touched the barrier, and it felt extremely sturdy, just like the white mist barrier of the seal above. In its unopened state, it was impossible for him to break through it. Floating along the seal, Zhang Xian's eyebrows suddenly shot up in alarm. The otherworldly demonic tribe. Within the seal, there were several otherworldly demons that were advancing alongside the buildings. Naturally, they were unable to sense the two souls spying on them from beyond the barrier. These otherworldly demons each possessed a cultivation of Saint One Dan, and the killing intent that they exuded was strong enough to leave any man petrified in fear. What are they up to? Zhang Xian frowned. In order to reach the bottom of the lava, their group had to go through so much trouble, constructing the Great Heaven Reversal Formation to redirect the force of the burst of energies back downwards, in order to pass through the lava. Yet, This bunch of Saint One Dan otherworldly demons had actually been able to enter the ancient domain? How? And what were they up to? After making a few turns, the otherworldly demons soon arrived at a relatively small square in the midst of all of the buildings. At the center of the square was a square altar with a massive closed door on top. There was an exceptionally sturdy seal, driven by some kind of power, cast over the entire structure. Dozens of otherworldly demons were scattered around the structure, attempting to break open the seal. Zhang Xian turned his attention to the door at the center, and he immediately felt a devastatingly powerful heat being emanated from the depths of the door. Even in his current state, he could very well be reduced to cinders if he were to attempt to go close to it. What pure energy! Could it be that the lava in the surroundings was caused by the heat emanated from the door? Due to the extraordinary heat of the lava, their group had been thinking that the lava was linked straight to an earth core, where the earth core lava could be found. However, from the looks of it, their deduction was wrong. Most likely, the 100 meters of lava was likely the product of that door. Walala! While Zhang Xian was still taken aback by this shocking discovery, a towering otherworldly demon that possessed an astounding cultivation of Saint Four Dan suddenly walked into the square. At his command, the surrounding otherworldly demons roared furiously and began launching a powerful wave of attacks on the seal. Hong Long! A brilliant glow shone from the door, and a powerful burst of energies blasted up. At the same time, the seal grew slightly thinner. That burst of energies! Zhang Xian's face darkened. That was the very same burst of energies that had left them deeply troubled but they were planning to make use of. Chapter 1034, Crushed to death. To think that the devastating might that threatened to decimate everything within a radius of 1,000 kilometers would have originated from there. Who would have thought that it was a result of the otherworldly demon's attempt to break the seal? It was no wonder the burst of energies abruptly started acting up a few days ago. Most likely, those fellows had been trying to break the seal since then. He recalled what he had heard from Mu Shi and Wu Shi, about how a transcendent mortal Four Dan master teacher keeping watch over the area noticed an otherworldly demon loitering around the seal. That matter had left Zhang Xian perplexed for some time, but upon seeing this sight, everything suddenly came together like pieces of a puzzle. Most likely, the otherworldly demons knew that their attempts to break the seal would result in the accumulation of energies within the area, and naturally, if an explosion were to occur as a result of it, they would be the first ones to be annihilated, standing at the very center of the blast. Thus, they intentionally let out news to the local master-teacher pavilion regarding their activities in the area before continuing their attacks. Naturally, when the local master-teacher pavilion learned about the problems occurring with the seal, they would have no choice but to step in and intervene. While their efforts did save countless lives living in the area, it would be doing the otherworldly demons a huge favor as well. This also explained why the interval between each burst of energies was irregular as well. To break the seal, the otherworldly demons were launching their attacks in waves, taking a short breather in between so as to recover their strength. Naturally, the short breather that they took couldn't possibly be exactly the same each time around. If that's the case, it means that the otherworldly demons have a way to effectively communicate with their fellow brethren remotely, Zhang Xian analyzed grimly. If that was truly the case, their expedition to the ancient domain would be more dangerous than ever. The otherworldly demons that were attempting to enter the ancient domain at the moment might have been able to liaise with those who had entered 2 years ago, along with the old principal. That would mean that the other party commanded greater intelligence regarding the ancient domain than their expedition team. After taking a look, Zhang Xian finally understood what was going on, and a bitter smile surfaced on his lips. If the otherworldly demons hadn't attacked the seal, the heat emanated by the door would have gradually accumulated, and eventually, it would have grown too powerful and induced an energy storm that would part the lava above it, creating a natural passageway straight into the ancient domain. It is likely that the old principal made use of this energy storm to enter the ancient domain. In the end, the reason they weren't unable to find the ancient domain wasn't because they had found the wrong place but due to his formation flag releasing all of the energies accumulated within the seal. If he hadn't made a move a few days ago, the otherworldly demons might very well have stopped their attacks due to fears that they would die from the explosion. When the seal eventually opened, they would have been able to enter the ancient domain with ease through the energy storm. They would have been spared a great deal of trouble. What the heck was with that? Forget it, I should return to set up the formation now. Having made sense out of what was happening, there was no point in Zhang Xian remaining there. Thus, he beckoned to his clone before diving back up to where the golden origin cauldron was. It had roughly been 4 hours since he had entered the lava to cultivate, and the others were likely worried sick about him by now. This time, his clone was extremely obedient, not causing any trouble at all. After returning his clone to the myriad anthive nest, Zhang Xian had the golden origin cauldron surface. Just as Zhang Xian had guessed, the master teachers and combat masters outside were indeed very worried about him. His emergence from the lava left all of them heaving huge sighs of relief simultaneously. Zhang Xian scanned the crowd and said, "I am finally done scanning the geographical terrain below, so it is time to start setting up the formation. Everyone, prepare yourselves. Enter Ding Ding and await my command. Once we succeed, we will set forth immediately." Knowing how important the matter was, the crowd nodded grimly. "All right. Who?" With a loud bellow, the golden origin cauldron expanded itself to tenfold its previous size, around 20 meters wide. The crowd hurriedly got within it. Instead of entering the golden origin cauldron like the others, Luo Ruoxin headed toward Zhang Xian and said, "I won't be going in, I will accompany you outside. It will be safer for you to get into Ding Ding. I fear that you might meet with danger following behind me." Zhang Xian frowned. If something happened, at least the golden origin cauldron could bear the brunt of the blow. If Luo Ruoxin remained outside, she would be potentially exposing herself to grave danger. Furthermore, if she couldn't keep up with the group and the lava caved in on her. "Don't worry, I still have a couple of life preservation means up my sleeves," Luo Ruoxin said with a light smile. "All right then." Seeing how confident Luo Ruoxin was and recalling how she could very well be an offspring of the Luo clan, one of the sage clans, Zhang Xian relented. "Ding Ding, listen to my command. When I order you to set forth, you are to move immediately. There mustn't be the slightest bit of hesitation from you." Zhang Xian turned around to command the golden origin cauldron before flying up to the area right above where the burst of energies was headed towards. It had already been around 8 minutes since the last burst of energies, so the next one was due soon. Flicking his wrist, Zhang Xian took out more than 100 formation flags, and they floated right before him. Activating his eye of insight, he stared intently at the lava beneath him, waiting for the right moment to move. Boom! A moment later, the lava beneath began to flurry. A sharp glint flashed across Zhang Xian's eyes as he flicked his wrist, and the formation flags swiftly flew down into their respective positions. Activate! While standing in midair, Zhang Xian stomped his feet, and powerful gusts of air spread into the surroundings like water ripples. Wang! A massive formation instantaneously came to life. Who? The moment that the formation was activated, the lava beneath finally couldn't house the burst of energies anymore. As if a scissors tearing across a piece of silk, a massive rip appeared in the lava as the burst of energies headed right toward the massive formation. Hong long long. The instant that the burst of energies collided with the formation, it was absorbed and accumulated within the formation. The Great Heaven Reversal Formation, when used in battle, had the effect of blocking the opponent's attack and returning it back at the latter. When utilized well, it could return the attack back at one's opponent without any loss of energy. In other words, on top of being a defensive formation, the Great Heaven Reversal Formation had offensive means as well. Of course, that was easier said than done, and the formation had its limits, too. For one, if the absorbed energy was beyond the durability of the formation, the person who set up the formation could very well suffer strong backlash and possibly die on the spot. Seeing how the absorption of the power contained in the burst of energies hadn't resulted in the shattering of the Great Heaven Reversal Formation, Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief as he wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead. In truth, he had not been too sure if the formation would be able to withstand the immense might contained in the burst of energies either. It was fortunate that he had learned the 7-star Heaven's Path formation art earlier. Otherwise, even if it was guild leader Han setting up the Great Heaven Reversal Formation, the imperfections in setting it up could have resulted in the other party's formation being unable to withstand the violent burst of energies. Worried, the crowd in the Golden Origin Cauldron had been keeping an eye on the situation outside with their spiritual perception, and upon seeing this sight, guild leader Han couldn't help but narrow his eyes in shock. Principal Zhang sure has a deep understanding of formations. His initial plan had been to have Zhang Xian hide within the Golden Origin Cauldron while he set up the Great Heaven Reversal Formation. However, upon seeing this sight, he felt relieved that he had decided to go with Zhang Xian's call instead. If he had obstinately chosen to take on the task himself, not only would the expedition team have failed to get into the ancient domain, he could very well have died from the backlash as well. Even though the Great Heaven Reversal Formation was a Grade 7 pinnacle formation, the other party had managed to set it up so perfectly that it harnessed prowess on par with a Grade 8 formation. There was not the slightest flaw that he could see in it. Not only was it perfectly harmonized with his surroundings, it was even further reinforced by the heat of the lava beneath, granting it unimaginable prowess. Amidst his shock, the burst of energies finally calmed down, and the formation was done charging up as well. Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up as he flicked out a formation flag, and he tossed it forward powerfully. Tzzzz la. Just like how he dealt with the huge accumulation of energies within the seal a few days ago, the formation flag struck an opening of the Great Heaven Reversal Formation, and an inconceivably massive burst of might blasted forth along the formation flag. Boom! Under the incredible might of the blast, a huge opening was ripped through the lava. Go! Knowing that this was their chance to head through, Zhang Xian bellowed loudly, and the Golden Origin Cauldron hurriedly dashed into the opening. Zhang Xian swiftly shot a glance at Luo Ruoxin before dashing into the opening as well. Knowing that the passageway through the lava would only remain open for a brief moment before closing in on them, he executed the Heaven's Path movement art and darted forth at the fastest speed possible. Over the past few months, he had been trying to merge the Heaven's Path movement art together with the Red Dust Heaven ascending steps, and just a few days ago, he had finally managed to do so perfectly. With the strengths of the two techniques merged together, Zhang Xian was able to move as swift as a streak of lightning, allowing him to keep up even with the Saint Four Dan Pinnacle Golden Origin Cauldron. Luo Shi. Fearing that Luo Ruoxin might have been unable to catch up, Zhang Xian turned around to take a look, only to see her only around 3 to 4 meters behind him. No matter how fast he traveled, the distance between them didn't seem to lengthen at all. As expected of an offspring of a sage clan, her speed sure is fearsome. Zhang Xian nodded in awe. Honestly speaking, even up to this point, he was still unable to discern how powerful the young lady behind him was. Nevertheless, considering how the other party was able to keep up with his Heaven's Path movement art, and judging from her leisurely look, it seemed like she wasn't anywhere close to exerting her full strength yet. There was no doubt that she was an expert. Boom! The Golden Origin Cauldron and Zhang Xian passed through the 100 meters of lava in the blink of an eye. With a resounding crash, they landed in the ancient domain. Everyone, hurry out. There are otherworldly demons in the area, so be careful. Zhang Xian roared deafeningly as he quickly took his stance in front of Luo Ruoxin. Based on what he had seen earlier, there were dozens of otherworldly demons in the area. While most of them were only at St. One Dan, there were quite a number of them around, so it was still imperative that they remained careful. If the otherworldly demons were to attempt to launch an assault on them at this moment, their unprepared expedition team could potentially suffer quite a few casualties. Otherworldly demons? The crowd hurriedly flew out of the Golden Origin Cauldron and swiftly put up a defensive formation, assessing their surroundings warily. However, with a look, they couldn't help but fall into a daze. Wu Shi looked at Zhang Xian with a doubtful look on his face. Principal Zhang, is this the ancient domain you spoke of? Shouldn't it be filled with buildings? Why is it all rubble? Rubble? Zhang Xian was surprised by the question. He quickly took a look at his surroundings as well, and just as the other party had said, the exquisite buildings that he had seen just a moment ago had collapsed into rubble. Huge puffs of white smoke were rising from them, indicating that they had just fallen a moment ago. Could it be that the otherworldly demons knew that we were coming, so they decisively chose to destroy the ancient domain in advance? Zhang Xian remarked. Cough cough. Seeing Zhang Xian's incensed look, Guild leader Han said awkwardly, they weren't the ones who destroyed it. Rather, it seems like the impact of the rebounded burst of energies was too great, to the extent that it not only tore the lava apart but jolted the ancient domain into the current state it is in as well. The rebounded blast generated by the Great Heaven Reversal Formation was so great that it had ended up devastating the ancient domain as well. I was the one who did it. Zhang Xian's lips twitched in embarrassment. He had been praising his clone a moment ago for not causing any trouble this time around, but who would have thought that he would end up causing trouble instead? What the heck was this? Right, where are the otherworldly demons? Did they flee? Embarrassed, Zhang Xian hurriedly changed the topic. Recalling those fellows that he had seen earlier, he quickly scanned his surroundings, but in that moment, a sheepish voice sounded in the air. Master, I think that I might have accidentally crushed them. Chapter 1035, Sink Sun Branch, Crush Them. Shocked, Zhang Xian hurriedly looked beneath the golden origin cauldron, and there, he saw a pile of flattened otherworldly demons. Most of them were at Saint 1 Dan, but there was a slightly larger figure who had reached Saint 4 Dan. Nevertheless, unable to stand being crushed by the golden origin cauldron, he was still reduced into meat paste. His entire body was plastered strongly to the ground, unable to torn off it. Seeing that the golden origin cauldron was still lying comfortably on a pile of carcasses, Zhang Xian commanded impatiently, hurry up and move away. Yes. The golden origin cauldron hurriedly leaped away. Zhang Xian began tabulating the number of carcasses in the area, and it tallied with the number of otherworldly demons he had seen earlier in his soul form. Those fellows probably couldn't have imagined that the burst of energies would suddenly be rebounded on them, severely injuring them. After which, before they even attempted to escape, an enormous golden origin cauldron fell upon them, crushing them to their deaths. In a sense, their deaths were quite tragic. Well, at least they died quickly, so they didn't suffer too much. Zhang Xian rubbed his glabella in distress. I was intending to capture one of them to find out how they managed to enter the ancient domain, and what that door over there is, but this. How am I to interrogate them now? Not only did the rebounded blast from the formation destroy the entire ancient domain, the golden origin cauldron had even crushed all of the otherworldly demons to death. Without any intelligence to work with, how were they supposed to advance? After a moment of hesitation, Zhang Xian sent a telepathic message into the myriad anthive nest. Violet Leaf King, do you recognize this fellow? The Violet Leaf King swiftly swept the surroundings with his spiritual perception before responding. Young master, I am not too sure about those Saint 1 Dan peons, but that Saint 4 Dan otherworldly demon is one of the upper 5 kings, the Fireleaf King. Fireleaf King. Zhang Xian was stunned. To think that the esteemed Fireleaf King of the 5 upper kings would end up being crushed to death like cannon fodder, not even given the chance to speak a line at all. Wasn't this a little too pitiful for him? Indeed. The Fireleaf King has the ability to control heat and flames. In an environment such as this, he would have been able to display prowess far beyond that of a Saint 4 Dan pinnacle expert. How did you manage to kill him? The Violet Leaf King asked in surprise. The upper kings were not only strong, each of them also possessed their own unique secret art. For the young master to have killed one of them and yet be unaware of his identity, the Fireleaf King sure was pitiful. Thinking about it, it seemed like the young master had already defeated 6 of the 10 great kings of the Qingtian lineage so far. He really was the nemesis of the Qingtian emperor. Ah, it was an accident. Zhang Xian shook his head helplessly. Since the other party was already dead, there was no point thinking too much into it. With a grasp, Zhang Xian took the storage rings of the otherworldly demons and scanned through their contents carefully. However, there was no useful information to be found. Thus, he turned to the crowd and said, the buildings might have collapsed, but there might still be useful items lying around. Let's try combing the area and see if we can find anything. While the place had been mostly reduced to rubble, there were still some parts of it that were intact and discernible. If the old principal and the others had been here before, they might be able to find clues on them. The crowd nodded before scattering into the area. Seeing that Luo Ruoxin was standing still on the spot, Zhang Xian turned to her curiously and asked, "You aren't going to look around? If there is anything of use, the otherworldly demons will have long found and taken it." Luo Ruoxin shook her head and said, "Since all of the otherworldly demons were gathered here when they were killed, there is no doubt that there is something amiss with the door. We might not have even entered the real ancient domain at all." This. Zhang Xian was taken aback before nodding in awe. As expected of an expert from a sage clan, her eye of discernment was indeed extraordinary. If they were already in the ancient domain, the otherworldly demons wouldn't have been wasting their effort trying to destroy the seal on the door. Besides, even if there were some treasures of the ancient domain lying around the area, the otherworldly demons would have long swiped them clean and stored them in their storage rings. They couldn't possibly have left them behind for others to take. As expected, it didn't take long for the others to return empty-handed. Wu Shi walked up and said, "The ancient domain is constructed within a cavern, and it is only roughly several hundred meters wide. We have searched around the area, but there is nothing at all. Should we try searching once more?" After 4 hours of recuperation, he had already recovered to his peak condition. He could easily get a clear picture of the entire ancient domain by scanning it with his spiritual perception, and if there was anything to be found, he would have surely found it regardless of whether it was hidden beneath the rubble or not. Waving his hand, Zhang Xian said, "I see. There should be no need to search any further. If I am not mistaken, the secret should lie in this door over here." Hearing those words, the crowd turned their attention toward the door. The door wasn't too large, roughly 5 meters tall and wide. It was covered by a seal, and from time to time, it would emanate a fearsome heat, making it difficult for anyone to approach it. Back when we charged through the lava, I noticed that the otherworldly demons had been attacking the seal, seemingly trying to open it, Zhang Xian explained. He couldn't say that he had seen it with his soul, so he could only justify it by saying that in such a way. "Attacking the seal?" Wu Shi repeated with a frown. Raising his palm, he stepped forward and struck the seal. "Don't." Noting Wu Shi's action, Zhang Xian suddenly felt his hair stand on end. He hurriedly yelled for the other party to stop, but it was already too late. Thus, he could only quickly bellow, "Everyone, get back." After saying those words, he anxiously retreated from the door. Noticing the peculiar state that Zhang Xian was in, the crowd quickly backed away as well. Not long later, the seal emanated a brilliant light, and a powerful burst of energies blasted upward, tearing through the layer of lava above them. However, not too long later, the powerful burst of energies abruptly returned, striking the area where they had been standing a moment before. The flattened carcasses lying on the ground were knocked into the air forcefully like rubber balls, and under the ravaging might of the burst of energies, their bodies were torn to shreds, inducing a rain of flesh and blood in the area. Upon seeing this sight, everyone couldn't help but wipe the cold sweat off their forehead. This was especially so for Wu Shi. Had Principal Zhang not reacted swiftly and instructed the others to back away, the weaker members of their expedition could very well have suffered grievous wounds from the earlier shockwave. He had thought that it was just an ordinary seal, but who would have thought that it would induce such a powerful burst of energies? More importantly, there was still the Great Heaven Reversal formation that Principal Zhang had set up previously. Any energy that they released from below would be returned back to them at full might. Just the thought of it was sufficient to send shudders down their spines. Not only is the seal sturdy, we will even have a rebound from the burst of energies each time we attempt to attack it. How are we supposed to break the seal like that? The crowd warily returned back to the door before staring at one another hesitantly, unsure of what they should do. There was nothing else in the area, and the only thing they had was the door. If the place they were currently in wasn't the ancient domain, it was very likely that the door was the entrance to the ancient domain. But, given that they weren't able to shake the seal in the slightest, how should they proceed? If they were to strike it, it would generate a burst of energies that would eventually rebound back onto them. In a sense, the current situation they were in was even harder to resolve than the one before. Those otherworldly demons were here for some time, but they were still unable to find an alternative solution to the problem. It won't be easy for us to do so either. Considering the rate at which the seal dissipates with each strike, it will at least take several days of effort to break it open. Just thinking how they would have to face a few days of rebounds from the burst of energies left the entire expedition team trembling in fear. After a moment of discussion, the expedition team was still unable to find a solution to the problem. Thus, guild leader Han turned to Zhang Xian and asked, "Principal Zhang, do you have an idea in mind?" After everything that they had been through, everyone had deep respect and admiration for the young principal. Even guild leader Han had no choice but to admit that the other party was far more knowledgeable and wiser than him. Zhang Xian frowned. "Allow me to contemplate for a while." Under normal circumstances, as long as he could approach the door and touch the seal, he could resolve the problem easily. However, the heat that was emanating from the door was simply too great, such that he couldn't hope to get close to it with his current strength. The seal was currently inactive, and Wu Shi's earlier strike hadn't activated it either, only jolting it. As such, he was unable to compile a book on it. At the same time, his eye of insight wasn't strong enough to see through the door either. "Let me see if I can get close to the door." Clenching his jaws, Zhang Xian tried to walk over. As long as he could do it, he would surely be able to find the flaws of the seal through the Library of Heaven's Path and resolve it. Driving his Heaven's Path Shinchi as he proceeded forward, Zhang Xian still felt searing heat assaulting him relentlessly, causing sweat to rain down his forehead. "Who?" Eventually, he came to a halt. Lifting his gaze, he found that he was still 20 meters away from reaching the door. There was no way he could touch it from that distance. Even though he had refined his soul earlier, it had done nothing to enhance his Jinqi and the resilience of his physical body, so his body's ability to fend off heat was still the same as ever. "My physical body is still a little too weak. If only I could cultivate it now and strengthen it." Zhang Xian sighed. It was indeed possible for his soul to touch the door, but putting aside the fact that he could not do so in front of so many people, he wouldn't be able to compile a book through the touch of his soul either. His Jinqi cultivation was already at nascent saint pinnacle, and he needed the 7-colored earth jade essence to achieve a breakthrough. Thus, the only way out was to find a way to enhance his physical body so that he could quickly touch the door and compile a book on the seal. With such thought in mind, Zhang Xian returned to the crowd and asked, "Does anyone here have a Sync Sun branch?" Sync Sun branch? Are you referring to a branch of the Sync Sun tree that only survives in extremely arid climates? Wu Shi frowned. The Sync Sun tree was an exceedingly rare plant that only lived in areas rich in earth flames. It needed to be exposed to sunlight for long hours each day, and if it came into contact with the slightest bit of rainwater, it would immediately combust and turn to ash. Due to this bizarre property, Sync Sun branches were even rarer than saint artifacts. Indeed. Zhang Xian nodded. A Sync Sun branch was the final artifact required to cultivating the quintuple incandescence golden body. As long as he could find one and absorb the aura of the sun sealed within it, he would be able to finally achieve consummation 1 in this physical body cultivation technique. It might only have been a single stage of difference between the fourth incandescence and the fifth incandescence, but it signified the difference between major accomplishment and consummation. Upon reaching this stage, the 5 incandescences would finally form a complete system within the body, creating a cyclical relationship, thus enhancing the prowess that one's physical body could exert manyfold. Upon reaching this level, one would be able to crush Saint Dan experts such as the Byzantium Helios beast with just the sheer prowess of one's physical body. The Cinque Sun branch is an extremely rare medicinal herb, but I have to say that you are really lucky. Just a few days ago, when I was looking through the market of Firesource City, I happened to find one and bought it. This should be it, right? With a chuckle, guild leader Han flicked his wrist and passed over a wooden branch that was almost as thick as an arm. The area around Firesource City happened to have the climate suited for Cinque Sun trees to grow, so it would pop up in the market from time to time. Guild leader Han happened to spot one while loitering around the market, and thinking that he could resell it elsewhere and earn a huge profit, he had decided to buy it. Chapter 1036, Quintuple Incandescence Golden Body, 5th Incandescence, indeed, that's it. Zhang Xian's eyes lit up in excitement. The wooden branch in the other party's hand wasn't too large, but reminiscent of charcoal, it emanated intense heat. There was no doubt about it, it was a Cinque Sun branch. He had casually asked for it, but who knew that guild leader Han would really have one in his possession, and such a large one at that? It was definitely enough for him to cultivate the 5th incandescence. How much does it cost? I will buy it from you. Zhang Xian asked as he took it. When he took the formation flags from the others earlier to help everyone pass through the lava, it could be considered to have been a public matter with everyone's interests at stake, so it was fine for him to not pay for it. This time around, however, he was intending to use the Cinque Sun branch to cultivate the 5th incandescence of the quintuple incandescence golden body and raise the prowess of his physical body. This was a private matter, and thus, it was only right for him to pay for it. We are venturing into the dangerous ancient domain together, and it is only right for us to help one another. How can I charge you for this? Guild leader Han shook his head. As valuable as the Cinque Sun branch was, it was only a material possession. Other than to sell it for a couple of spirit stones, it was of no use to him. If the other party could use it to break the seal on the door and bring them into the real ancient domain, he could consider the item to have been put to good use. Those are two different matters and should be kept separate. If you don't accept my payment, I won't be able to accept the Cinque Sun branch at ease. Zhang Xian shook his head. Knowing that master teachers were obstinate about their own values, guild leader Han knew that it would be improper for him to insist on the matter. Thus, he could only shake his head with a bitter smile and say, I bought the branch at 200 high-tier spirit stones, so I will sell it to you at the same price as well. All right. Zhang Xian nodded and passed 200 high-tier spirit stones over. With the profits from the sales of the cloud mist flowers and the fortune he had procured from emptying out the storage rings of the otherworldly demon kings that he had subdued thus far, he had more than 10,000 high-tier spirit stones with him at the moment. This bit of money was nothing to him. Guild leader Han accepted the spirit stones with a helpless expression on his face, but his admiration for the young man couldn't help but deepen. Putting aside Zhang Xian's incredible knowledge on formations despite his young age, his self-discipline was truly admirable. He had a clear idea of what should be done and what should not be done, and he didn't allow greed to blind him. A principled person like him was a true blessing to mankind, and there was no doubt that he would eventually go on to achieve great things in the world. The other master teachers nodded in approval at that sight. The young man before them was truly the embodiment of the word upright. It was no wonder he had become the principal of the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy at such a young age, whereas they had still been humble nobodies at his age. Just the thought of it left them reddening in embarrassment. This was especially so for Lu Mo1. If only there was a hole in the ground, he would have dived in without the slightest hesitation. Back when he first met the young man, he had thought that the other party was too arrogant, and he had even berated the other party for it. Yet, not only did the other party manage to resolve the problem with the seal, the other party was even the one who led them through the lava. His capability was truly something that Luo Mo could never hope to match up with. If the other party was the brilliant moon in the sky, Luo Mo was the humble dirt on the ground. That was the vast, unbridgeable distance between them. I am going to cultivate using the Sync Sun branch now, so please do make use of this time to rest and recuperate. The seal could very well be the path to the ancient domain, and it is unknown what kind of peril we will face there. To heighten our chances of survival, we should ensure that we are in our peak state so that we are ready to face any dangers that come our way, Zhang Xian said. The crowd nodded. After which, Zhang Xian headed to a quiet corner of the rubble and sat down. Holding the freshly obtained Sync Sun branch in his hands, he drove his Jinqi and began cultivating. Boom! The energy within the branch flowed through his meridians and nourished every single cell, inducing a qualitative evolution in his body. The quintuple incandescence golden body served to strengthen the vitals of one's body and, through doing so, enhance the strength that one was able to exert. Having patched up the flaws of the quintuple incandescence body, it had become a heaven's path cultivation technique. Naturally, he was able to cultivate the fifth incandescence swiftly without any problems. The immense energy flowing through his meridians stimulated his entire body, such that even his blood began to metamorphose as well. 2 hours later, a resounding echo sounded from his body as the 5 incandescents in his heart, lungs, spleen, liver, and kidneys came together to form a smooth cyclical flow. A brilliant light shone from Zhang Xian's body, and in that instant, it felt as if his body had become indestructible. At the same time, Zhang Xian's physical appearance changed slightly as well. His height grew slightly taller, his shoulders became slightly broader, and his waist grew slightly slimmer, forming a perfect streamline figure. Feeling the power flowing through his body, Zhang Xian opened his eyes and clenched his fists tightly together. Wonderful! With the sheer might of his physical body in itself, the current him could kill Saint Tu Dan experts easily. In terms of resilience, his body was already comparable to a Saint artifact. A Saint Lotier artifact to be exact, but nevertheless, it was still extremely fearsome. Should someone attempt to hack the Glacier Rain sword down on him right now, there was no doubt that it was the Glacier Rain sword that would shatter. In fact, even if he were to go head-to-head with the Golden Origin Cauldron, he wouldn't lose by much. It could be said that the current him was no different from a human-shaped weapon. Even without a weapon in hand, he was still capable of causing devastating damage. Who? Exhaling deeply, Zhang Xian swiftly concealed the changes in his body and stood up. It was inconceivable for one's body to grow so much stronger with just a short moment of cultivation. There was no such thing as being too careful. In order to avoid any unnecessary trouble, it was still best for him to maintain a low profile. Lowering his gaze to take a look, he noted that the energy contained within the Sync Sun branch was nearly completely depleted. Stowing it in his storage ring, he stood up and returned to the door. Before he could even reach the door, he saw the crowd sitting in a straight line before the door, creating a rather bizarre sight. Upon seeing Zhang Xian, the combat master at the very back stood up and greeted him. "Principal Zhang, you have returned. What are you doing?" Zhang Xian asked doubtfully. "If you want to cultivate, so be it. But to be sitting in such a neat line as if you are queuing up at the cafeteria for food. What the heck? Ah, it's like this." Earlier, Wu Shi realized that it is possible to use the heat released by the door to refine one's Jinqi and make it even purer. Thus, we began cultivating using it. However, due to our differing tolerance to heat, we can only select positions that are suited to us, the combat master explained. Differing tolerance to heat? Zhang Xian nodded contemplatively. The fact that the sheer heat emanated from the door could melt the rocks within 100 meters into lava clearly showed how fearsome it was. The extreme conditions produced by the door were indeed very suitable to refine one's Jinqi. However, just as the other party said, everyone had a differing tolerance to heat. It was just like how his soul could only advance 50 meters at the start, but after cultivating for a bit, he was able to advance further and eventually reach the 100-meter mark. Indeed. The few of us can only cultivate at a distance of 40 meters away from the door, or else our cultivation could very well go berserk. Speaking of which, Wu Shi and the others sure are fearsome. They are actually able to stand the heat at 15 meters away, said the combat master as he shot a glance at the few figures in front with admiration gleaming in his eyes. Zhang Xian nodded. To be able to withstand the heat at 15 meters away, it seems like their physical bodies, souls, and jinqi are pretty strong. Zhang Xian had only been able to reach 20 meters away from the door himself when he tried earlier. The fact that Wu Shi and the others were able to reach 15 meters away was indeed incredible. The combat master suddenly recalled a matter and asked, "Right, Principal Zhang, didn't you leave to cultivate? Are you already done?" Zhang Xian nodded. "All right, I'll leave you to cultivate here." After saying those words, Zhang Xian began walking forward. In the blink of an eye, he was 20 meters away from the door. At this moment, only Wu Shi, guild leader Han, Feng Sun, and a couple of others were in front of him. Even Wu Tianqiong and the other principals were behind him at the moment. Principal Zhang walked over there just like that. Wasn't he unable to hold on earlier? Seeing how the young principal casually proceeded toward the 20 meters mark as he nodded at the other master teachers and combat masters while passing by them, gesturing for them to remain seated and continue with their cultivation, the lower jaws of the combat master nearly fell to the ground. At the same time, Feng Sun, who was seated at the 19-meter mark, saw Zhang Xian walk past him with a smile on his face, and his eyes nearly popped out of his head. He was a Saint 3 Dan pinnacle cultivator, 1,000-men commander of the Combat Master Hall, and coming to the 19-meter mark had nearly cost him his life. He had needed to sit down immediately to cultivate so that he could neutralize the fire poison in his body. Yet, that fellow was walking past him casually with a bright smile on his face, as if he was just wandering the streets, not pressured by the heat in the least. Did he have to be so exaggerated? Wondering how far the other party would be able to proceed, Feng Sun's gaze followed Zhang Xian, and before long, he saw the latter walk up to Wu Shi and begin chatting with him. "Wu Shi, there is no need to get up. I am just heading over there to take a look, so do continue with your cultivation. There's no need to stand on ceremony." Following which, the other party continued proceeding forward with a smile on his lips. 14 meters, 13 meters, 12 meters. In the blink of an eye, he was already within 10 meters of the door. The searing heat induced a sizzling sound from his clothes, which were seemingly ready to break apart at any moment. Yet, Zhang Xian continued walking forward with the same bright smile from before, as if he was completely impervious to the heat. This time, Feng Sun wasn't the only one who was shocked silly. Even Wu Shi and guild leader Han ended up trading shocked glances with one another, and their mouths began twitching from the sheer ridiculousness of the sight before them. 15 meters already left them feeling as if their bodies were going to rip apart, and that fellow had actually managed to walk within 10 meters. On top of that, his face even had a smile plastered on, as if it was nothing at all. That monster. 8 meters, 7 meters, 6 meters. As the other party slowly proceeded closer to the door, his eyebrows inadvertently shot up, seemingly starting to feel the pressure. Hong Long. Jinqi abruptly burst forth from the acupoints of the other party, wrapping his body. Upon seeing this sight, Wu Shi gulped. He is only using his Jinqi when he is 5 meters away from the door. Just how powerful is his physical body? When Zhang Xian walked leisurely past him, seemingly unfazed by the heat, he had thought that the other party was just putting on an act. However, seeing that the other party was only driving his Jinqi when he was 5 meters away from the door, he realized that he had been sorely mistaken. The other party was truly unfazed by the heat. But still, to only have to drive his Jinqi when he was within a 5 meters radius of the door, wasn't his physical body a little too strong? Could the other party have gone away to cultivate his physical body? But it was common knowledge that the physical body was the most difficult of all to cultivate. How did he manage to make such a huge breakthrough in his physical body cultivation within just 2 hours? Amidst his shock, he saw Principal Zhang walk all the way up to the door, raise his hand, and place it on the door. After that, he abruptly retreated 8 steps before coming to a halt. He closed his eyes, seemingly musing over something. A moment later, he opened his eyes once more, and with a deep frown, he stared at the door ahead of him with a peculiar expression on his face. How is it possible? Chapter 1037, The Frenzied Luo Ruoxin. Noting the peculiar expression on Zhang Xian's face, Wu Shi couldn't help but ask, Principal Zhang, is there something wrong with the seal? In his view, Principal Zhang was a person who would retain his composure even if the world was about to collapse on them. Yet, for him to show such an expression at this moment, something huge must have happened. Oh, it's nothing much. I just find it a little weird. Zhang Xian's words petered out into silence, seemingly not intending to say anything more about it. He walked to a distance of 40 meters away and beckoned everyone over. Everyone, halt your cultivation for just a moment. Let's discuss how we should break the seal and enter the door. Hearing those words, the crowd hurriedly rushed over with eyes lit up in excitement. Principal Zhang, have you found a way to overcome the seal? I did manage to find a way, but... Scratching his head, Zhang Xian had no idea where he should start from. What he had just seen was simply too inconceivable for anyone to believe to be true. Thus, he decided to just get straight to the point. Do any of you have the spirit solution of vigor with you? Spirit solution of vigor? Everyone glanced at one another in astonishment, not knowing why Zhang Xian was asking such a thing. Spirit solution of vigor was the academic name for the urine of saint beasts so that it didn't sound as crass. Usually, cultivators would take some when they traveled so that they could demarcate a zone to prevent spirit beasts from harassing them at night. Back when Zhang Xian challenged Yu Su to a physician life-and-death duel, he had forced Yu Su to drink it, leaving him feeling so indignant that he nearly spurted blood. Considering how old the ancient domain will be, I assumed that there wouldn't be any saint beasts and spirit beasts, so I didn't bring any along with me. Same as well. I usually bring some with me, but as I grew stronger, I found that the occasions I needed any were growing fewer and fewer. Furthermore, it feels a little crass to have such an item in my storage ring, so I threw it away. We of the Combat Master Hall never use such a thing. If spirit beasts dare to engage us, we just slaughter them. As long as enough blood is shed, the others know better than to provoke us. The crowd shook their heads. Those who had participated in the expedition were all respectable individuals. Han Su was the head of the Qingyuan Empire Formation Master Guild, Wu Rufeng and Mu Yuan were 7-star master teachers, Wu Tianqiong, Shen Pingchao, and Wu Ran were the principals of master teacher academies. Given so, they would never keep something as crass as the urine of saint beasts in their storage rings. As for the Combat Master Hall, they didn't have the habit of bringing the spirit solution of vigor with them. Thus, it turned out that there was no one in the expedition team who had it. None of you have any? Zhang Xian pinched his glabella before turning to Luo Ruoxin. Noting Zhang Xian's gaze on her, the young lady snorted, I don't have any either. I see. Since no one has any with them. Zhang Xian shook his head regrettably before taking out a pile of pots, bowls, gourds, and woks and saying helplessly, we will just have to do it ourselves. Pooh! Everyone staggered weakly and nearly spurted a mouthful of blood. From searching for the spirit solution of vigor to having us produce it ourselves. What the heck is with this twist? Furthermore, we are all respectable figures. To urinate like that. Everyone felt like their mind was going to blow from the sheer insanity of the situation they were facing. Ignoring the conflicted faces around him, Zhang Xian waved his hand and said, hurry up. Also, we will need as much as possible. Whether we can break the seal or not will depend on how much you are able to produce. In that moment, everyone felt like crying. All right. If you are unwilling to do it, so be it. There is no need to get angry over it. Luo Ruoxin felt the final string of rationality in her mind threatening to snap. In her entire life, she had never gotten emotional over anything, as if a spectator of the world or a still painting. However, ever since she met this fellow, she had found all kinds of emotions coming to her. It was as if someone had vanquished the silence from her life. All right. I'll leave. Seeing how Luo Ruoxin would erupt if he said a word more, Zhang Xian hurriedly turned around and fled. However, even after Zhang Xian's departure, Luo Ruoxin still felt the flames of anger burning intensely within her, unable to be quelled without a good beating of him. While she was considering whether or not she should catch up to fellow back and give him a piece of her mind, she suddenly heard a distressed voice from not too far away. I don't have anything to pee out of. What do I do? Can anyone help me? Luo Ruoxin turned her gaze over and saw the golden origin cauldron looking around anxiously, seemingly looking for help. Don't leave. Won't any of you aid me? Or, Master, can you smith one for me? Dark lines streaked across Luo Ruoxin's face. Just what kind of people had she gotten involved with? Oblivious to the reason behind the young lady's rage, Zhang Xian found himself an isolated area as well. However, at this moment, a thought flashed across his mind, and he slapped his forehead in realization. How could I have been so silly? The next moment, he disappeared from the spot and entered the myriad anthive nest. Floating in midair, Zhang Xian loudly bellowed, all of you, come over. Hoo. In the blink of an eye, all of the saint beasts within the myriad anthive nest flew over. Knowing that the ancient domain would be dangerous, he had made sure to bring a few more saint beasts with him when he returned to the Master Teacher Academy. Taking into account the Byzantium Helios beast and the 9 kings of the Cloud Mist Ridge as well, he had more than several dozen saint beasts in the myriad anthive nest in total. I need all of you to urinate for me. Saying those words, Zhang Xian passed a pile of pots toward the beasts as well. Roar! The beasts were bewildered by the abrupt command, but considering that the other party was their master, they dared not act against his command. Thus, they took a large pot each and turned around. In an instant, an overwhelming stench filled the myriad anthive nest. A few moments later, the beasts returned with huge pots in their hands, each weighing 10 jin one at the very minimum. Quite a number of these saint beasts had massive physiques, boasting both heights and lengths of several meters. Naturally, the amount of urine they released was also proportionate to their size. Not bad. Seeing how the bunch of fellows didn't disappoint, Zhang Xian nodded in satisfaction. With a swift movement, he poured all of the spirit solution of vigor together into a massive pail. All in all, it weighed more than 2,000 jin. Alright, you all can get back to whatever you were doing previously. Zhang Xian dismissed the saint beasts with a wave of his hand before leaving the myriad anthive nest. Returning back to the door, he noted that there were quite a few people who had returned. Most of them were from the Combat Master Hall. Here is what you needed. Feng Sun harumphed as he passed a pot over. The others also hurriedly did the same as well, but the quantity wasn't a lot. The 10 or so members of the Combat Master Hall had only produced around half a pot in total. So little. Zhang Xian glanced at the pot before turning his gaze back to the powerful-looking members of the Combat Master Hall with a deep frown. So many lively young men, and yet, this was all they could produce. Recalling how badly he had been pummeled, Feng Sun suddenly felt a surge of rage and lashed out. Little. What about yours? Why don't you bring yours out to show us then? Zhang Xian was just about to speak when Wu Shi, Mu Shi, Wu Tianqiong, and the other master teachers flew over. Their faces were all reddened in embarrassment. Putting theirs together, they realized that their amount didn't even come close to the combat master's. This. Zhang Xian couldn't help but feel a surge of helplessness. It was fortunate that he was sharp enough to think of a backup plan, or else, with that pitiful amount that all of them had produced, it wouldn't even be enough to water a plant, let alone break a formation. Forget it, the amount you all have is too little. Let's use mine instead. Seeing how the amount from everyone combined did not even add up to a single pot, Zhang Xian shook his head and tossed it aside casually. Feeling humiliated by Zhang Xian's words, Feng Sun lashed out furiously. Use yours. Can yours be more than all of us combined? This is mine. Boom. A massive wooden pail weighing over 2,000 Jin 2 fell onto the ground, raising a cloud of dust in the air. Pooh! How is that possible? Seeing the massive pail, the eyes of the combat masters and master teachers couldn't help but fly around the place, frenzied by what they were seeing. Even if your bladder is big, surely there should be a limit to it. With so much water, it could easily drown you several times over. How in the world did you manage to find so much water within you? The one who took the heaviest blow from this matter was naturally Feng Sun. He felt blood gushing up his throat once more. Just how in the world did you manage to pull this off? It is one thing for you to be strong, but to be able to urinate so much, is there a folded space in your bladder? If we had known that you were able to produce so much, we wouldn't have bothered going through all the trouble. Alright, I'm going to break the seal now. Ignoring the looks on the faces around him, Zhang Xian raised the pail with his hand, and with a step, he flew into the sky, heading for the seal. On the other hand, hearing that Zhang Xian was about to break the seal, the others quickly snapped out of their frenzied states and hurriedly turned their gazes toward the door. They had studied the seal carefully earlier, but they had not been able to find any other method to break it. Even the otherworldly demons that had come before them had been left with no choice but to resort to brute force, attacking it relentlessly. Yet, Principal Zhang was actually able to find a solution just by touching it, instructing them to gather their urine right afterward. Everyone was curious to see just what the method of breaking the seal was for it to require urine. Who? Before everyone's gazes, Zhang Xian arrived directly above the door, and with a grim look, he tapped on the bottom of the pail. Boom! A huge hole immediately appeared in the pail, and the contents stored within fell toward the seal. Tzzzzzzzzzzzz. As if sulfur meeting metal, upon contact with the seal, a sound of corrosion immediately sounded from the seal. In an instant, the incomparably sturdy seal dissipated into nothingness. Chapter 1038, How Big? That gesture was directed toward Wu Shi's response or a contemplative gesture on her part. Only Saint Nine Dan experts are capable of comprehending the laws of space. Zhang Xian blinked in astonishment. In truth, he hadn't thought that spatial manipulation would be such an advanced ability. He had once entered a folded space back at the Saint Ascension platform, and he had even ordered the myriad ant-hive queen to assimilate it into her nest. If that was the case, did it mean that the place had been left behind by a Saint Nine Dan expert as well? Back then, Kong Shi had only achieved a breakthrough to Saint Realm, so it was impossible for him to have set it up himself. That would mean that there was already a loyal Saint Nine Dan subordinate following him even back then. However, considering the incredible prowess and the unique charisma that Kong Shi commanded, it would not have been too difficult for him to take in a couple of followers who boasted strength greater than him. Back then, when I first met Luo Ruoxin in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy during the public lecture event, she was able to maneuver through the bustling crowd without anyone coming close to touching her at all. That seems to have been spatial manipulation as well. Such an idea emerged in Zhang Xian's mind, but he soon shook his head with a bitter smile. No, that should be impossible. She's only a 6-star master teacher, so even if she is stronger than me, she can't possibly be too far ahead. It is probably some kind of secret art or unique artifact. Having read all of the books in the Hongyuan Master Teacher Academy, Zhang Xian had learned that the Master Teacher continent was filled with all kinds of wonders. On top of unique constitutions that could emerge randomly among fortunate individuals from time to time, there were also formidable clans who possessed special bloodlines. Through the power of their bloodline, they could draw forth exceptional strength that had the potential to exceed any battle techniques in the world. This was also the reason the sage clans wielded immense power in the Master Teacher continent, with only few daring to oppose them. Perplexed, Zhang Xian turned to Luo Ruoxin and asked, "How can you be certain that it isn't a formation but a type of spatial manipulation?" Hearing those words, Wu Tianqiong and the others turned their gazes over as well. Concepts relating to space were extremely profound, far beyond what they could comprehend at their current level. Luo Ruoxin pointed a finger forward and said, "That's simple. Just look ahead and you will know." The crowd hurriedly turned their eyes over, and at the other end of the passageway they were currently in, the scenery abruptly changed. Meandering mountains that stretched into the horizon were filled with lush greenery. The air was comfortable, very different from the warm and dry environment around Firesource City. It was as if they had stepped into an entirely different world. Is this a folded space? It's massive. Zhang Xian was stunned. He had encountered quite a few folded spaces so far, and he even possessed a decent-sized one himself. However, one as large as the one before him, he had never thought that it would be possible for a folded space to be that large, let alone see one. He had thought that his folded space was already rather incredible to span several hundred meters from one end to the other, but the one before him could house mountains and rivers that extended to the horizon. Frightening. The larger a folded space was, the greater the pressure it would face from the external world, thus making it less stable. How in the world did the master of the ancient domain manage to create and maintain such a large folded space? Just as Zhang Xian was completely astounded by the sight before him, guild leader Han's voice suddenly sounded at that moment. He quickly turned his gaze toward the ladder, only to see the ladder's body completely stiffened in shock. "No, this isn't a folded space, this is a spatial formation. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.